Chapter 421. I only wanted to take a look around the Du household. Du Xiaofu raised his head. It was better not to enter the Du household now. Anyway, he did not know anyone inside. What could he do even if he went to the Du household? Even if the Du household had something to do with the separation of his family, it would not be too late to ask about it when the time was right. The Du household is not a place you can casually visit. Hurry up and leave, otherwise we will not be polite to you. A guard did not place Du Xiaofu in his eyes. How could the Du household be a place he could casually visit? What a tyrannical Du household, not even allowing people to see. Then why not find a large cloth to cover it up so that no one can see? Du Xiaofu shook his head and smiled indifferently. It really felt like when a person achieved the Tao, even his chickens and dogs would ascend to the heavens. Even the guards of the Du household were so arrogant. This made Du Xiaofu feel disgusted. Little brat, you are insulting the Du household, insulting the Du household. You must be captured and punished. Hearing this, the face of the leader of the guards immediately darkened. How could he allow someone to be disrespectful to the Du household? If this spread out, it would damage the reputation of the Du household. Instantly, the long spear in his hand trembled. In a flash, the runes on it shone brightly, and the spear pierced towards Du Xiaofu. The long spear was swift and fierce, instantly closing in on Du Xiaofu. The rather fierce attack proved that this guard was not an idiot. Humph! Following the guard's attack, Du Xiaofu coldly snorted. Just as the long rune spear was in front of him, his figure suddenly flashed, drifting like a god. In an instant, he appeared beside the guard, lightly waving his hand and landing on the guard's back. Bang! A low muffled sound rang out. The guard's back instantly trembled, a mouthful of blood spurting out of his mouth. His body directly smashed into the ground, a large mouthful of blood spurting out of his mouth. Audacious, you dare to attack the Du household! The surrounding guards were startled when they saw this, but they immediately attacked one by one. Dazzling spear lights crisscrossed and swept towards Du Xiaofu in an instant. Their attacks were clean and efficient, without any trace of politeness. Du Xiaofu raised his head slightly and tapped his right foot. Profound qi surged under the soles of his feet, and he immediately leaped up and retreated a few meters. He was incomparably swift and nimble, like a falcon leaping down, or a tiger leaping down. Chi la la! Several guards joined hands. Spear radiance flew through the air, blossoming with symbols. Their auras were not weak at all. The next time you make a move, you'd better be more careful. This time, I'll teach you a lesson so that you'll all remember. As soon as Du Xiaofu finished speaking, he waved his purple robe sleeve slightly, and a majestic gust of wind immediately swept out, ruthlessly sweeping across the bodies of the guards. Chi la la, Puchi. A strong gust of wind swept out, and those guards immediately screamed miserably. Each and every one of them coughed up blood as their bodies flew backwards. They fell into the distance in an incomparably sorry state, and even though they struggled, it was difficult for them to get up. Du Xiaofu had calculated his strength. He did not take their lives, but they would not be able to get out of bed for at least a year. Who dares to trespass into my Du household? Have you eaten the guts of a leopard? More than 10 figures immediately rushed out from the Du household. They were all dressed in silver armor and wielding silver war spears. Their auras were extraordinary, and their auras were sharp. These 10+ people rushed out and glanced at the few guards on the ground. Immediately after, they surrounded Du Xiaofu in a lightning-like manner. A 30-year-old man looked at Du Xiaofu. His eyes were sharp and arrogant as he said in a deep voice, "Brat, surrender." What a good Du household, not asking the right and wrong, and wanting to capture people without a fight. Du Xiaofu faintly smiled. These people's attire was exactly the same as the Du family people he had met not long ago. They were also the Silver Dragon Guards, the elite force of the Du family. Du Xiaofu's purple robes fluttered slightly and his aura was calm. However, at this moment, a domineering aura that could not be suppressed gradually rose on Du Xiaofu's resolute and determined face under the fierce aura of these dozen people. He glanced indifferently at the dozen people and said, "What if I am not willing to surrender?" "Then kill without mercy," the leading man said in a deep voice. "Who dared to cause trouble in front of the Dew household?" No matter what, daring to cause trouble in front of the Dew household meant that they did not put the Dew household in their eyes. This was already a serious crime. "I'm afraid you guys are not qualified," Du Xiaofu sneered. These 10 over Dew household silver dragon guards, he really did not put them in his eyes. Today, he had seen the arrogance of the Dew household, or perhaps it could be said that this was the face that the Dew household should have. But no matter what, Du Xiaofu would not allow anyone to bully him. Others could not, but the Dew household could not. "You're courting death," the leading man coldly snorted. The silver spear in his hand trembled, and the runes flashed. As if it had transformed into a silver python, it instantly pierced towards Du Xiaofu's chest. His attack was fast, accurate, and ruthless, and his aura was fierce and murderous. Du Xiaofu moved. He waved his hand and his 5 claws slightly bent. In the center of his palm, there were faint talisman patterns surging, blooming with golden light. It was as if he was holding a small storm in his palm. All of a sudden, Du Xiaofu's hand directly grabbed the spear that the leader had thrust out. With lightning speed, he forcefully grabbed the tip of the spear and sucked the power of the long spear into the golden profound chi vortex in his palm. After which, the power in his palm gushed out. From the tip of the spear to the body of the spear, the long spear suddenly shattered inch by inch, turning into fragments. A tyrannical force swept over, and the leading man let out a miserable shriek. Gotcha sounds came from his arms. Starting from his palms, all the way to his arms, his internal organs trembled, and a mouthful of dark red blood spurted out from his mouth. "Leader!" The surrounding dozen silver dragon guards were shocked. Immediately, they moved in unison. Numerous dark-colored spears rushed out like silver spiritual pythons, and a dozen spear lights rushed towards Du Xiaofu. Their auras erupted, and their might was extraordinary. "Get lost!" Du Xiaofu let out a deep cry. Shaking his arm, he waved his hand and violently swept it in all directions. In an instant, the space sank, and a golden energy scattered in all directions, causing Du Xiaofu's purple robe to flutter. Walala! With just a slight wave of his hand, the dozen silver dragon guards were in a miserable state. They were completely powerless to resist. Soon after, blood sprayed out from their mouths, and their faces were swollen, dripping with blood. Swoosh, swoosh! At this moment, the rather large commotion outside the mansion finally attracted the attention of more and more people. Inside the Dew family, figures leapt out one after another. Numerous gazes immediately looked at the miserable-looking silver dragon guards and silver dragon guards scattered on the ground. All of them had extremely ugly expressions. A strong man in his 30s stood at the front. Behind him, there were many people with powerful auras clustered. Their gazes then landed on Du Xiaofu's body. One by one, the members of the Dew family looked at Du Xiaofu, who was carrying a mysterious broadsword-like object on his back. He was young, around 17 or 18 years old. Within their ugly gazes, there was a trace of astonishment. "Are you the one who barged into my Dew family and seriously injured my people?" The strong man in his 30s looked at Du Xiaofu and asked. The aura around his body fluctuated, causing the surrounding space to tremble. He actually had the cultivation of an initial martial lord. "That's right." In response to the strong man's question, Du Xiaofu only replied with 2 simple words. Gazing at the group of people behind him, Du Xiaofu's eyebrows slightly twitched under the probing of his mental energy. Among this group of Dew family members, there were quite a few who had extraordinary auras. In particular, the auras on their bodies faintly caused some undulations in his body. Perhaps, this was due to his bloodline. As Du Xiaofu's words sounded, the gazes of the people who came out of the Dew family changed. Soon after, more and more Dew family members walked out, before they began to observe their surroundings. The strong man in his 30s tightly stared at Du Xiaofu, a cold glint flashing across his eyes as he said, "Why did you barge into my Dew family and injure my people?" I was only outside taking a look. How can I barge into your Du family's residence? They wanted to attack me, so I injured them. What's wrong with that? Du Xiaofu softly replied, a faint golden glow flashing across his clear eyes. What an arrogant brat! No matter who you are, surrender! Or else, don't blame me for suppressing you! The strong man said in a deep voice, his aura surging. An extremely vigorous aura was instantly awakened like a giant hibernating beast, as his aura abruptly surged. The aura on the strong man's body was extraordinary. Although he had just ascended to the martial marquis stage, his aura was extremely vigorous and ferocious. Faintly, it seemed to be accompanied by an extremely strange aura that caused one's heart to tremble. The protector is about to take action. Upon seeing this, the surrounding Du family members instantly began to retreat. The elder was about to take action and capture the brat who dared to cause trouble outside the Du family residence. As this aura swept out, the blood in the bodies of several Du family members began to solidify, their breathing becoming rough. As expected of one of the youngest protectors in the entire Du family. An extremely powerful and strange aura. Sensing the aura on the strong man's body, Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows. That aura was extraordinary and valiant, but faintly, there was another aura that seemed to be able to imperceptibly make him feel something in his heart. However, that feeling was difficult to describe clearly. But that valiant and strange aura, in Du Xiaofu's eyes, was still insufficient. He said to the strong man, "Your strength is not enough to stop me. I still have things to do, so I'll leave first." As his indifferent words fell, Du Xiaofu turned around and strode away. There was no need to continue entangling with the people of the Du family. It was more important to first go back and settle Li Shui's matter. As for the Du family, it would not be too late to come back when the opportunity arises. Chapter 422. Bang! A muffled sound rang out. Just as Du Xiaofu's figure was about to turn and leave, the burly man in his 30s stomped his foot on the ground and leapt up. His body was like an iron tower, finally landing directly in front of Du Xiaofu after he had turned around. The ground where his feet landed directly shook and then shattered into a pile of fine powder, cracks spreading and collapsing. Brat, after acting so impudently in my Du household, you still think you can come and go as you please? The Du household is not a place where anyone can come and behave atrociously. The burly man stared straight at Du Xiaofu, some coldness flashing through his eyes. An astonishingly vigorous aura emanated from him, with no intention of letting Du Xiaofu off. His aura surged, causing the surrounding space to immediately tighten. Why bother pestering me? Du Xiaofu's figure stood ramrod straight, the purple gold heavenly tower wrapped in purple cloth on his back about to set. Under the sunlight, the purple cloth reflected a cold purple luster, the indifferent aura around him exuding a domineering aura, his clear eyes hiding a frightening aura. At this moment, sensing the formless aura on Du Xiaofu's body, many people secretly trembled. That kind of aura was faintly unfathomable and hard to grasp. They could not help but feel solemn, fear and doubt arising in their hearts. Pretending to be mysterious, stay here first and talk later. The burly man in his 30s gave a low shout after his gaze moved slightly. Forming a hand seal, he waved his hand. As the hand seal formed faintly, the surrounding space trembled slightly, waves of runic energy leaving a vacuum mark in the air. A vigorous surge of profound chi in his body surged, surging in the air like a wave. Layers of ripples spread out, as if a tsunami had suddenly appeared, shocking everyone. Facing a young man who could seriously injure more than 10 Silver Dragon personal guards with just a wave of his hand, this burly man did not underestimate Du Xiaofu in the slightest. The moment he attacked, he used his full strength. In a short period of time, his palm was wrapped in strange dazzling runes, surrounded by vigorous profound chi. The palm seal immediately slammed towards Du Xiaofu. Overturning sea palm! A low roar came from the burly man's throat. The power of the palm print suddenly surged. The runes were dazzling and there were faint sounds of waves roaring. An energy that could topple mountains and overturn seas poured out in torrents, immediately enveloping Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu didn't move in the slightest in the face of such a terrifying attack from the burly man, allowing the palm print to land on him. Du Xiaofu sensed that this terrifying palm print had something to do with the Du family's Stormy Waves palm. It should be the upgraded version of the Stormy Waves palm. Now that it had reached the Marquis grade, its power had increased significantly. Boom! The palm imprint pressed down, enveloping Du Xiaofu. The space trembled as its aura soared into the sky. Chi! At the last moment, Du Xiaofu finally moved. In an instant, a shocking aura burst out. His eyes flashed and a fist covered in golden xian qi suddenly stretched out. Like a pale golden lightning, it directly collided with the burly man's palm imprint. At the moment when the palm imprint and the fist imprint collided, a golden talisman was suddenly released on the fist. It directly blocked the palm imprint that was crushing down. Then, waves of overbearing energy swept out. Bang! 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 Low muffled sounds came one after another. There were a total of 13 sounds. Waves of shocking energy waves had a total of 13 layers. The layers overlapped each other, and the aura almost multiplied. It became more and more shocking. When it reached the 13th layer, the aura had reached a terrifying level. It was like a shock wave that landed on the burly man's palm imprint. Kacha! The burly man's palm suddenly emitted the sound of bones cracking. His face suddenly turned pale and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. The bones in his palm were directly shattered. He resisted the intense pain and did not scream. However, his face was already twisted and ferocious. Du Xiaofu used the Stone City's Du family's oscillating fist, 9 heavy waves. Each wave was more difficult than the previous one. However, Du Xiaofu still used the perfected version of the oscillating fist, 13 heavy waves. Puchi! With the impact of the fist, the burly man's ferocious and distorted face immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. In the end, he was sent flying and landed heavily in the distance. His body was stuck in the ground and flew horizontally. Many of the hard stone slabs on the ground were shattered and turned into a large number of small stones that shot out. Looking at the elder who was sent flying while spitting out blood, the entire Du family was silent. Huff! Huff! Sounds of people sucking in cold air rose and fell. No one would have thought that a martial Lord Realm Protector would be unable to withstand a single blow. It seems to be our Du family's oscillating fist, but it seems to be a little different. It's even more powerful! Who is this kid? How can he have such terrifying strength? Du Qi and Du Yuqin are about the same age as this youth, but they are far from having such abnormal strength. The surrounding Du family people immediately discussed in shock. That youth's strength was too terrifying. Even the younger generation of the Du family of the same age could not compare to him. It's the Du residence. Someone is causing trouble in the Du residence. Someone has seriously injured the Du residence's people. Someone is actually causing trouble in the Du residence. The shocking commotion here also spread out. Immediately, people on the surrounding streets followed the sound and came to the vast square outside the Du residence to watch. Seeing that someone was actually causing trouble in the Du residence, which was a rare sight in 100 years, a large group of onlookers immediately gathered to watch the show. Set up the formation and capture that kid! In just a short moment of shock, more and more people gathered in the Du residence. Among the Du family disciples, there were also many men and women who jumped out. A total of 36 people jumped out instantly. 16 of them were cultivators of the Pulse Spirit Realm. Among them, there were also cultivators at the peak of the complete Pulse Spirit Realm, and the peak of the Pulse Spirit Realm. 36 people, 36 directions, surrounded Du Xiaofu from all directions. Vaguely, the 36 directions were connected. 36 spears shot out, and 36 auras exploded. Heavenly Spirit Earthly Fiend Heavenly Spear Formation! The leader of the group, an old man in his 50s, shouted. His gaze was gloomy, and his face was ashen. His eyes were cold like waves. Someone dared to cause trouble in the Du residence. He definitely could not let him go. Otherwise, how could the Du residence establish itself in the Empire and become the Protector residence? The 36 people moved together. Runes exploded on their spears. Everyone moved together. Dense runes surged, and the spear lights intertwined. Boom! A terrifying aura suddenly exploded. The space seemed to be overturned. Runes rushed to the sky. The 36 spear lights erupted, turning into 72, then 144, 288. The terrifying and sharp spear lights crisscrossed. Energy erupted, and all of them enveloped Du Xiaofu in an instant. The vast spear lights seemed to want to drown Du Xiaofu in an instant. The spear lights were densely packed and tore through the air. It was unstoppable. 36 cultivators of the pulse spirit realm formed a formation. They complemented each other and channeled the energy of heaven and earth. At this moment, even an ordinary martial lord of the mystery level cultivator would not be able to withstand such an attack. Du Xiaofu did not dodge. In his clear eyes, a chill finally surged. A kind man will be bullied, and a kind horse will be ridden. Since you guys are like this, I have no choice but to show you no mercy. Du Xiaofu waved his hand. A faint golden light surged out. Suddenly, golden runes flashed on his skin. In an instant, his hand swept out fiercely. Sky Shaker Wings! Du Xiaofu's hand was like a palm leaf fan. Wherever it passed, faint golden runes flashed and condensed. It was as if an arc-shaped golden space had condensed around his palm. Layers of golden runes were densely packed, like the golden wings of a golden-winged rock. A domineering and fierce aura suddenly spread out from Du Xiaofu's body, causing the space to tremble. Then, as Du Xiaofu's hand seal streaked across the space, a golden light erupted, illuminating the sky. It was like a golden bomb had exploded at the entrance of the Du household. Rumble! Golden runes and mysterious runes overflowed. She waves surged to the sky. A large area of space was directly swept out, leaving behind traces of a vacuum. The ground exploded, and the spear lights shattered. It was a terrifying scene. The terrifying golden energy was incomparably overbearing. It spread out in all directions like a shockwave in the void. The 36 strangely connected figures were very strong, but Du Xiaofu's strength was enough to overcome all of them. They were all submerged by the golden shockwave, and in the end, all of them were swept away. Many miserable shrieks were heard. The 36 figures were fiercely blown away. Some had their ribs broken, some spat out blood, and some had their arms broken. They all fiercely fell dozens of feet away. Their appearance was incomparably miserable. On the square, the purple-robed youth with the mysterious broadsword on his back slightly fluttered. His aura was so domineering that it made people's hearts tremble. The surrounding gazes were dumbfounded as they looked at the domineering figure. They couldn't help but feel a surge of emotions. That youth was so shocking and domineering. At such a young age, his strength was so terrifying. What an impudent brat! Let's join forces and suppress him. We can't let him go! Among the crowd of Du household, there was an old man with an ugly expression. His eyes were malicious and cold. If the Du household couldn't even protect their own entrance, how could they protect the country in the future? The old man was the first to leap into the sky. An extraordinary aura erupted from his body. He waved his hand and immediately pounced towards Du Xiaofu. Suppress that brat. We can't let him go! Many of the Du household's experts leaped into the sky. Runes surged, and various kinds of attacks were launched. Everyone took action together. All the attacks were aimed at Du Xiaofu. They wanted to join forces and suppress Du Xiaofu. Chapter 423. Ha! Du Xiaofu suddenly raised his head and laughed heartily. His laughter was accompanied by profound energy, and swept out like a sudden clap of thunder. The sound waves were like waves of air that spread out in the sky above the imperial capital. Suddenly, the laughter stopped, and a chill spread out in his eyes that were suffused with a golden light. He shouted loudly, "What a Du household! Today I want to see if you can do anything to me!" As Du Xiaofu's voice fell, a golden halo suddenly wrapped around his body. His arms shook and he rose from the ground, like a rock being born. Soaring into the sky, he punched out a fist imprint, the air waves soaring to the sky. Bang! The old man who attacked first was directly smashed down from the sky by Du Xiaofu. His body was like a meteorite crashing into the square, and he was stuck in the ground, unable to get up at all. Only large cracks spread out. Bang bang! Du Xiaofu's figure was like a deity, his footsteps unpredictable. Two burly men fell from the sky at the same time, vomiting blood. Boom! Du Xiaofu stomped on another Du family youth in midair, causing blood to spurt out of his body as he was sent flying. Chi la la! The golden light around Du Xiaofu's body exploded, like a shockwave. More than 10 Du family people were directly shaken from the sky to the ground, their noses bruised and their faces swollen as they screamed incessantly. Ayo! Roar! Some of the Du family people activated their pulse spirits. Beast shadows entrenched themselves, roaring in the sky with astonishing power. Destroy! Du Xiaofu lightly shouted. Wherever his figure passed, the aura of the golden rock would explode, like a peerless ferocious beast appearing. With a raise of his hand, all the pulse spirits were destroyed into pieces. Pucci, no! With their pulse spirits shattered, many Du family people were seriously injured. One figure after another fell from the sky to the ground of the square. This scene caused the hearts of the spectators in the distance to tremble. There was actually someone who dared to make a move in the Du household. The most shocking thing was that purple-robed youth, who was actually so terrifyingly powerful. Under the purple-robed youth's terrifying strength, the Du household's people were simply no match for him. They were simply swept away. What is the background of this young man, to not even put the Du household in his eyes? This is the first time the Du household has been swept away like this in front of their home. The Du household has been unhindered for so many years. Could it be that this time they have provoked an existence that even they cannot afford to provoke? More and more spectators gathered around, and they were all shocked by the ferocious scene. Lightning fist! Suddenly, a loud shout rang out from within the Du manor. Following which, an old man's figure soared into the sky and appeared in front of Du Xiaofu. Runes spread around his body, and one could faintly see that his body was accompanied by some lightning. Boom! The old man's fist shot out, accompanied by flashes of lightning. It was like a small ball of lightning, carrying a terrifying energy to block Du Xiaofu. The vast power spread across the sky, causing the hearts of the surrounding people to tremble and their souls to palpitate. The elder is here, he will definitely be able to capture that brat. As the terrifying aura spread out, a large number of pale-faced and scarred Du family members, who were incomparably miserable, revealed a joyous expression. It seems to be an expert from the Du family. Can that purple-robed youth still withstand it? The Du family is definitely not to be underestimated. The surrounding spectators were instantly worried for Du Xiaofu. The arrival of the powerful and terrifying aura meant that the Du family's expert had arrived. No one would doubt the strength of the Du household. Before the lightning fist, the surrounding space suddenly trembled, as if there was an invisible energy of the heavens and earth fluctuating. Finally, with an astonishing speed, accompanied by the pressure of the lightning, it suddenly appeared in front of Du Xiaofu's chest. Martial Lord Nirvana Realm! Du Xiaofu's eyes moved. The Martial Lord Realm's Nirvana Realm cultivation was not bad, especially the power of thunder and lightning. It seemed that many disciples of the Du family had the power of thunder and lightning in their martial arts. With a wave of his hand, golden light erupted. Du Xiaofu resisted the power of lightning, and a domineering aura erupted, blocking the terrifying fist. Boom! When the two energies collided, the golden runes and the lightning radiance wreaked havoc and exploded. The surrounding space immediately collapsed and a gale swept out. The energy runes did not dissipate in the collision. Instead, they suddenly blossomed with dazzling light. Humph! The younger generation is not allowed to be presumptuous in front of the Du household. The runes were dazzling, and the figure of the old man took the opportunity to appear in the air in front of Du Xiaofu. A powerful and terrifying aura filled the sky, passing through the obstruction of space, and turned into a huge light screen. Accompanied by the flickering of lightning, it once again enveloped Du Xiaofu. Martial Lord Nirvana Realm, you are not qualified to be arrogant in front of me. Du Xiaofu coldly snorted, and immediately formed a seal with his hand. Runes rapidly surged, and in the end, they rapidly condensed into the shadow of a dragon. The space suddenly fluctuated, and green and red runes filled the sky, and a huge shadow of the scarlet cloud dragon swept out. Roar! The scarlet cloud dragon roared, and light overflowed, causing the surrounding space to surge like waves. The ripples spread, and the aura was like the king of all beasts. The shadow of the scarlet cloud dragon appeared in the sky, and a monstrous aura spread out in an instant, causing the surrounding space to become distorted, and the surrounding space to tremble. Such a terrifying aura caused many people's expressions to change. It turned out that the purple-robed youth's strength had reached such a terrifying level. In the blink of an eye, the profound cloud scarlet flood dragon's phantom directly engulfed the former's lightning screen. As they collided in midair, a muffled thunder-like sound immediately resounded. A terrifying force swept out, causing the space to violently tremble. Roar! The dragon roared, and the sound waves shook the sky. The terrifying aura caused people's hearts to tremble, and then it ruthlessly slammed into the lightning screen, and a terrifying force swept out, surging and terrifying. With such a terrifying energy pressure, the air in the surrounding space of the square was crushed and scattered, forming a vacuum. Rumble! Then, under everyone's shocked gazes, the enormous shadow of the scarlet cloud dragon destroyed the lightning screen, and dazzling green and red runes burst out, suppressing the sky. Crackle! The lightning screen of the Du family elder was deadlocked for a moment, before it was also destroyed, and turned into lightning runes that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, scattering everywhere. Poochie! The old man's body was also sent flying. His body finally landed on the ground, and he staggered back a dozen steps before stabilizing his body. Wherever the old man's feet passed, the ground cracked and collapsed. After that, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Immediately after, the aura on his body withered, and his eyes revealed a look of shock. Even the elder was defeated! The crowd trembled. The Du family elder was actually blasted down. Just how powerful was the purple-robed youth? No matter who you are, since you dare to be so impudent in my Du household, I will definitely not let you off today! Just at this moment, an indifferent and dignified voice suddenly slowly came out from the Du household. Then, the space in the Du household fluctuated, and a group of figures appeared in the air from the Du household. This group of figures were mostly elders, but there were also women and a few middle-aged men. Following the appearance of this group of figures, the sky and earth inexplicably trembled, as if the air in the entire space was frozen. At the same time, Du Xiaofu's eyes slightly raised, and his pale golden pupils slightly shrank. Those are the elders of the Du family. Even more experts of the Du family have come out. The surrounding onlookers were shocked. Under the pressure of that aura, the profound energy in their bodies was blocked, and their heartbeats accelerated. A purple-robed youth actually attracted so many experts of the Du household. One by one, the experts of the Du household stood in the air, looking at the dozens of people on the ground who were riddled with injuries. It was a tragic sight. Many of them had broken bones and were dripping with blood, and miserable shrieks continuously sounded out. This caused the gazes of all the experts to twitch. Since when had such a thing happened in the dignified Du household of the Protector King? Just as the elite practitioners from the Du family appeared, a middle-aged burly man with distinct facial features stared at the figure of the purple-robed youth with a broadsword on his back in midair. Immediately, a violent fluctuation gushed out from his eyes. Brat, to be so impudent in my Du household, you're courting death. Seeing that the Du family disciples on the ground were riddled with injuries, a yellow-robed elder roared. If he did not capture this youth, the Du household would lose all face in the future. It could be seen that the youth was also an extremely powerful and abnormal individual. His figure flashed out, and immediately formed a blood-veined spirit. Roar! Runes flickered and formed a blood-veined spirit. The yellow-robed elder's body was instantly condensed into a giant tiger-veined spirit that was covered in a dazzling light. It looked like a tiger eyeing its prey, ready to pounce. It was incomparably powerful and shook one's soul. The yellow-robed elder merged with the vain spirit. At the same time, the aura of a martial lord at the peak of the Nirvana realm erupted. Compared to the elder who attacked just now, his aura was even stronger. Activating the vain spirit, it was even more ferocious and terrifying, suppressing the sky. Roar! The tiger's roar shook the sky, and its aura was terrifying. In an instant, it pounced towards Du Xiaofu. Under the ferocious aura of a tiger pouncing on its prey, the tiger's claws waved, causing the ground to crack. Its power was ferocious and shocking, as if it could tear Du Xiaofu into pieces. Above the tiger vain spirit, a dazzling rune bloomed, like a volcanic eruption, drowning a large area of space. Roar! Right at this moment, a soul-shaking tiger roar suddenly sounded out in the sky. Under this roar, the ferocious tiger vein soul phantasm also paused for a moment. Everyone in the sky felt fear for no reason, and their profound energy was blocked. Xiao Yu, continue writing. There are only a few hours left. Brothers, don't forget to send flowers. Otherwise, they will be cleared by the system tomorrow. Roar! Chapter 424. Following that even more ferocious and terrifying tiger roar, a large number of gazes could not help but look up. Immediately, they saw a gigantic black flying tiger flapping its wings in midair. That gigantic black tiger was surrounded by a dazzling light. Its body was pitch black, and black runes soared into the sky. The tiger's roar stirred up spatial ripples that soared into the sky. It was as if a huge wave was surging, shaking the heavens and the earth. The gigantic tiger flapped its wings, and a terrifying air wave swept out, bringing with it a tornado-like spatial airflow that swept across the vast sky. It was incomparably domineering, causing the surrounding spatial airflow to undulate endlessly. It was as fast as lightning and inexplicably ferocious. Roar! This gigantic black tiger swooped down like a ferocious tiger pouncing on its prey. Its speed was much faster than the pulse soul gigantic tiger activated by the old man. It opened its mouth ferociously and roared, as if it did not take the pulse soul phantom seriously at all. The figure that swooped down like a black thunderbolt raised its tiger claw and waved it. Overbearing golden runes flickered, and a tiger claw that was extremely domineering directly crashed onto the pulse soul phantom that seemed to have been crushed into a daze at this moment. The gigantic black tiger's claw landed on the pulse soul phantom, as if it wanted to tear the vast sky apart. Accompanied by a domineering and ferocious wave that swept across, it instantly brought about a huge gust of wind that swept out and spread out, shaking the surrounding space until it was on the verge of collapse. Swish! Swish! The ferocious pulse soul phantom actually had no power to resist under the gigantic black tiger's claw at this moment. It was directly torn into rune fragments by the gigantic black tiger's claw. Immediately after, the body of the martial lord at the peak of the Nirvana realm was also sent flying. What kind of tiger demonic beast is this? The martial lord at the peak of the Nirvana realm spat out blood from his mouth. He only stabilized his body after a few hundred feet. His pale face was filled with shock. The power on the gigantic black tiger was like the supreme existence of the tiger clan. Just now, his pulse soul was actually unable to resist. Just how terrifyingly powerful was the bloodline of the gigantic black tiger? One must know that his pulse soul phantom of the tiger clan also had an extremely powerful bloodline. Little tiger has benefited greatly. Du Xiaofu raised his head and looked at the little tiger that appeared in front of him. The little tiger had broken through to the mysterious level of the beast's lord realm not long ago, and was already able to easily defeat a martial lord realm expert of the Du royal residence at the peak of the Nirvana realm. With such strength, it could definitely be considered as abnormal among the demonic beasts. What kind of demonic beast is this? What a terrifying demonic beast! It can affect one's meridians and souls, making it impossible for one to fight against it. All eyes were fixed on the giant ink-black tiger that had suddenly appeared. Its body was densely covered with ink-black scales, as if it was cast from the deep night sky. The deep golden color was faintly jumping. Its enormous and intimidating body was no less than 100 feet. It was sturdy and mighty, and its tiger claws created clouds when it stepped on the air. On the body of the ink-black tiger, an earth-shattering might spread out. It emitted dazzling ink-black runes that oppressed others like a mountain. It glared at them covetously, and its pressure surged, causing them to tremble with fear. "Brother!" On the back of the giant ink-black tiger, Du Shaoqing jumped down. Her green dress fluttered in the wind, and her ethereal big eyes were like twinkling stars. She was like a lotus that had just sprouted, elegant and pure. But at this moment, when she looked around and saw a large group of people surrounding her brother, anger gradually surged out from her pure and innocent eyes. "Are you okay?" Du Xiaoyao jumped from the back of the king's scaled demonic tiger to Du Xiaofu's shoulder. Her pale golden spiritual eyes glanced around, and she didn't pay much attention to it. "I'm fine, just some small troubles," Du Xiaofu said softly. "That terrifying black tiger is with that purple-robed youth. That purple-robed youth's background must be extraordinary." Everyone could see the relationship between the terrifying ink-black tiger and Du Xiaofu, and they were once again shocked. To be able to have such a terrifying demonic beast following beside him, one could imagine his background. Normal forces definitely wouldn't be able to take out such a thing. One by one, the experts of the Du family floated in the air. At this moment, their hearts trembled as they looked at the terrifying ink-black tiger. Du Xiaofu looked at the surroundings of the Du household, and then his gaze swept around. His foot stomped on the ground, and his figure instantly swept onto the back of the little tiger. He slightly raised his head and said to Du Xiaoqing, "Little Qing, let's go back." "Humph!" Du Xiaoqing's delicate face was filled with anger. She was originally happily shopping when suddenly, second brother Du Xiaoyao felt that her brother was in trouble and immediately rushed over. At this moment, seeing that her brother was about to go back, she had no choice but to turn around and leap onto the back of the little tiger, intending to leave. "This little child is extraordinary, this demonic tiger is also extraordinary. But since you've come to the Du household today, then stay for a few more days." Among the experts of the Du family, an old man in his 70s leapt out and said while looking at Du Xiaofu, "The second elder is also here. It's rare for him to show his face. It's the second elder, he's about to make a move." Looking at the old man in his 70s, the experts of the Du family below were filled with anticipation. With the second elder making a move, they would definitely be able to capture the tiger. The second elder was known as the #1 person under the martial king realm. He was famous throughout the entire empire, and was the existence closest to the martial king realm. He was the top expert of the Du household. "I'm just looking around. If I want to leave, I'll leave. If I want to stay, I'll stay. What does it have to do with you? Don't bother me, or else, I won't be polite." Du Xiaofu stepped on the giant tiger, his purple robe fluttering in the wind, a broadsword on his back. His eyes began to turn sharp. Although today's encounter with the Du household did not have much to do with them, he could not help but have some expectations for them. "Little child boasting shamelessly, do you really think that there's no one in the Du household?" A group of old men shouted loudly, their auras surging. Waves of terrifying auras erupted, causing the entire space to tremble. Some old men channeled the power of lightning, faintly forming dark clouds in the sky. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in midair, their auras suppressing the vast sky. "What a powerful Du household!" Amongst the spectators, everyone was trembling in fear. The experts of the Du household were not just for show. There were many martial marquis experts, and there were even experts scattered outside. In the entire empire, who could shake such a colossus like the Du household? Little child's temper is not small. Come to the Du household to cultivate your body and mind for a period of time. It will definitely be beneficial for your future cultivation. On the face of the 70-year-old second elder, there were some creases squirming. His tone was casual, but everyone could hear that the meaning behind his words was to capture Du Xiaofu and bring him back to the Du household to be imprisoned. As his voice fell, lightning runes suddenly erupted from the body of the old second elder. In the sky, the dark clouds suddenly trembled. Silver snakes flickered, and its power suppressed the vast sky. A lightning palm print condensed, and the old man's figure appeared like a ghost. His aura was majestic and vast, and it suddenly suppressed Du Xiaofu, Little Tiger, Du Xiaoqing, and the rest. Peak of the complete martial marquee stage! Du Xiaofu's eyes narrowed, a frightening and severe glint flashed across his eyes. Suddenly he said to Du Xiaoqing, "Little Qing, leave them alive." "Yes, brother." Du Xiaoqing understood. She was already angry, and at this moment she could no longer hold back her anger. Before her lovely voice had completely faded, she had already disappeared from the tiger's back. In this short period of time, when her figure reappeared, it was a graceful green girl's figure that seemed to be able to affect time, and strangely appeared in front of the second elder's lightning palm print. "So many people are bullying my brother, I will not let you off." Du Xiaoqing was furious. Her slender hand reached out and clenched into a fist. Green light erupted from her body, and her fist directly collided with the second elder's lightning palm print. In a flash, the fist and the palm print directly collided. At this moment, the second elder seemed to have sensed something. His old face suddenly changed drastically. Soon after, he involuntarily spat out blood from his mouth. Then, the lightning runes around his body directly exploded. His old body was like an old bird with broken wings as he was violently smashed down. Finally, he was heavily smashed into the hard stone ground below. Boom! The ground trembled, as if the mountains were collapsing and the earth was splitting. The second elder of the Du household, who was hailed as the #1 person under the martial king stage, was smashed down like an ant in front of everyone's eyes. It was as easy as crushing dry weeds, and was unmatched. The surrounding space abruptly turned deathly silent. Everyone's eyes were lifeless, especially the Du family members. Their expectant gazes had already turned into shock and fear. Goo goo! After a brief moment of silence, the surrounding onlookers looked at each other, and sucked in a breath of cold air as they looked at the beautiful girl in green. In the air, the group of Du family experts' gazes suddenly turned to shock and fear. Everyone looked at the girl in green, as if they had seen a ghost. "And all of you." Du Xiaoqing's charming face was cold, and her tender voice was clear and ethereal. Her entire body was wrapped in a dazzling green light, and her demonic and holy aura was enchanting. She actually disappeared from her original spot like a ghost, and her afterimage was difficult for people to see clearly. When her figure appeared again, she had already appeared in front of the group of Du family experts. Rumble. Green light erupted, and her delicate hands danced. Du Xiaoqing furiously attacked. The mysterious green runes on the talisman were dazzling, and her aura solidified, suppressing the entire sky. Everyone could feel the terrifying aura that had erupted from the graceful figure's body, and the pressure caused the profound energy in their bodies to stagnate. Their meridians and souls did not dare to move, and their souls were afraid. Bang! An old man was smacked down from the air by Du Xiaoqing. His blood was dripping, and it was a horrible sight to behold. The huge force swept across, and the sky also shook violently. Chi la la! Almost like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten weeds, several figures were sent flying like kites with broken wings. One figure after another fiercely fell from the sky, like meteorites crashing down, and hit the ground of the square. Bang, bang, bang! Another few big men, old men and women, could not escape from their misfortune. They could not even escape, and simply could not resist. Their bodies fell from the sky one after another. Chapter 425. Low muffled sounds continued to ring out as the air trembled endlessly. Subsequently, the surrounding spectators saw the high and mighty experts of the Du household falling from the sky one after another, as if they were unable to withstand a single blow. They did not even have the strength to retaliate. Poochie! The experts of the Du family fell to the ground one after another, causing the ground to tremble and crack. Blood spurted out from their mouths as their faces turned pale. It was simply a tragic sight. Boom! A martial lord of the Nirvana realm was smashed into the coiling dragon pillar outside the Du household. Instantly, the pillar broke and crumbled. Bang! A martial lord of the mysterious realm was smashed into the pillar of the Du household's red door. The majestic door of the Du household was smashed into pieces, causing the courtyard walls to rumble and crumble. In the end, it was reduced to rubble. In the air, no one was able to resist the green figure that passed by. She was unparalleled. Within the Du household, many figures were alarmed as they flew out. There were also many figures that rushed out of the Du household. Their gazes were trembling as they were at a loss for what to do. Their eyes were filled with shock. Among the crowd below, a young girl in a light blue dress stared at the miserable state of the Du family's experts on the ground. Her eyes were filled with shock, and when she saw the beautiful figure in green, her expression changed drastically as she shouted, "Xiaoqing, stop! Quickly stop!" In the air, Du Xiaoqing heard a familiar voice and stopped attacking. She saw the young girl below. It was Du Yunxin from the Tianwu Academy. Yunxin, why are you here?" Du Xiaoqing was puzzled as she didn't expect Du Yunxin to appear here. "This is my home. Naturally, I'm here." Du Yunxin smiled bitterly. She had seen Du Xiaoqing's strength before. Even a martial king wasn't her match. In the entire Du household, there weren't many people who could stop Du Xiaoqing. Seeing that Du Xiaofu had also appeared in the air, the expression in Du Yunxin's eyes quietly fluctuated. Perhaps she already had a rough idea of the situation before her eyes. "I didn't think that there would be such an expert from the beast race descending upon my Du palace. This has really opened my eyes." Suddenly, from within the Du household, a deep and resounding voice sounded out. Following which, a majestic figure appeared in midair. The majestic figure that appeared was wrapped in multicolored light. Extremely terrifying fluctuations rippled around his body. His aura caused the hearts of the surrounding onlookers to tremble. Within the multicolored light was a large man in his 50s. He looked extremely old, and his entire body was wrapped in multicolored light. Symbols faintly fluctuated, and resplendent silver snake radiance was released. The terrifying aura was like that of destruction, making people feel intimidated. "Greetings, Patriarch!" When the people of the Du family saw the figure in the air, they immediately bowed respectfully as if they had seen hope. "Protect the king? That's to protect the king!" The gazes of countless onlookers trembled slightly, and they were filled with awe and respect. The Protector King was the core protector of the entire empire. His status was only below the emperor, and he was respected by all citizens. When people saw the Protector King, they were incredibly excited and kowtowed to him. Chi. Behind the Protector King, within the multicolored light, there were several tall and straight young figures standing in the air. All of them had extraordinary auras and a noble demeanor. Du Xiaoqing looked at the Protector King who had suddenly appeared. Her clear eyes were suffused with a green light. She looked straight at the Protector King, and said with a tender snort, "For Yun Xian's sake, I'll spare you. You better not provoke me and my brother again. I'm not here to fight. Forget it, if you want to leave, then leave." The Protector King looked at Du Xiaoqing, but his gaze fell on Du Xiaofu, who was on the back of the giant ink-black tiger. On the back of the little tiger, Du Xiaofu looked at the Protector King, who was wrapped in multicolored light, and then looked at the surrounding sky. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he said to Du Xiaoqing, "Little Qing, let's go!" "Humph!" Du Xiaoqing gave a tender snort at King Wu, and then she leapt into the air and landed beside Du Xiaofu. Numerous gazes from all around looked at Du Xiaoqing, and the light in their eyes fluctuated violently. Exactly what kind of terrifying power was contained within that graceful and slender figure? She was actually able to single-handedly defeat a group of Du family practitioners. In the end, even the King Protector was alerted. That kind of strength was too terrifying. "Young man, what is your name, and where are you from?" Wrapped in multicolored light, the Protector King was clearly asking Du Xiaofu. His deep and resounding voice echoed in the air. "My name is Du Xiaofu, and I'm from the Stone City's Du family." Du Xiaofu looked at the Protector King from afar, and his voice was like thunder, rumbling in the air. He did not hide anything. The Stone City's Du family was definitely not a disgrace, and there was nothing to hide. Du Xiaofu, and I'm from the Stone City's Du family. As Du Xiaofu's voice rang out, it was like a clap of thunder to many Du family experts. In an instant, it caused the pale faces of many people to change, and many of their gazes were fixated on Du Xiaofu. However, there were still many Du family juniors, servants, and branch family members who were at a loss. Not many of them knew about the relationship between the Stone City's Du family and the Du household, and they did not know that Du Xiaofu's existence was related to a major event back then. Du Xiaofu's voice was mixed with profound energy, and it was clearly heard by many people. Suddenly, the gazes of many trembled. It's him, he's Du Xiaofu, the number 1 on the Tianwu Academy's inner martial ranking, Du Xiaofu. Is it him? The Du Xiaofu who is rumored to have refined a high-grade Dao artifact and attracted a lightning tribulation. So it's that ferocious fellow. No wonder he's so powerful. He's indeed incomparably ferocious. Even this ferocious youth has come to the capital. I heard that Du Xiaofu has outstanding talent and is incomparably terrifying. He truly lives up to his reputation. Voices of discussion immediately rang out. Du Xiaofu's name was not unfamiliar in the imperial capital. Soon after, the news spread out in all directions. Stone City's Du family, is that the branch family? Another terrifying fellow has appeared. Someone from the Du family exclaimed. Their hearts trembled as they looked at the valiant and domineering purple-robed figure on the back of the black tiger. However, there were even more people who did not know about the Stone City's Du family, and even more so, they did not know about the matters back then. Especially the matter that happened less than 20 years ago. It had become a taboo in the Du household, and only those who knew about it knew about it. Those who did not know would never speak of it. That matter had long been sealed by the clan, and no one was allowed to leak it out. Little tiger, let's go back. Du Xiaofu's expression was indifferent as he lowered his head and said to the little tiger. Walala, the little tiger flapped its wings, and a terrifying wave of chi swept down. On its wings, a circle of golden talisman patterns wrapped around it, spreading a domineering and intimidating aura. The floor in front of the Du household was torn apart and covered in dust. Roar! The black tiger flapped its wings and left. Its voice was like thunder, and its pressure was rolling, causing people to tremble in fear. Father, why did you let them go? In midair, behind the king protector, an extraordinary youth asked. That beast clan girl is too strong. I don't have the confidence to keep her here alone. Your granduncle is also in seclusion, and the great ancestor is wandering without a trace, the protector king said softly. His eyes flickered like lightning, and then he muttered. As expected, a tiger father will not beget a dog's son. Talent is extraordinary, but it's a pity. Countless gazes in the surroundings watched the huge ink-black tiger leave. They looked at the graceful green figure and the tall and straight back of the purple-robed man with a broad sword on his back. Their gazes trembled as ripples rose in their eyes like stormy waves. The Lord Protector's residence, the dignified Du family, had been swept away by someone today. Even their residence had been destroyed. Since the existence of the Lord Protector's residence, such a thing had never happened before. However, not only did it happen today, but the man and woman also left right after. That girl is a Beast Clan expert. Her strength is too strong, and I don't even have the confidence to protect the king. I had no choice but to let them go. Someone predicted that if the Protector King had absolute confidence in suppressing that terrifying girl, it wouldn't be easy for Du Xiaofu and that girl to leave today. Each and every one of the Du household's martial marquis experts could be considered as experts in the entire empire. But in front of that young girl, they were heavily injured to the point of not being able to retaliate. Just how shocking was that? That young girl's strength was definitely at the king level. The number 1 on Tianwu Academy's martial ranking, Du Xiaofu, appeared in the imperial capital, barged into the Du household, and swept away all the experts there. This news spread like a thunderclap, and not long after, the entire imperial capital was shaken. In an instant, the news was like a thunderclap, attracting the attention of countless forces. This news also caused many forces to search for a certain aura. Perhaps this matter would be the fuse that would cause a commotion in the imperial capital. Dusk. Between the horizon and the imperial capital, Dragon City, a simple and vigorous curve could be seen. The setting sun emitted a red glow. When Du Xiaofu, Du Xiaoqing, Du Xiaoyao, and the little tiger returned to the guest inn, it was already dusk. In the guest room, Ouyang Shuang had yet to return, and Du Xiaofu didn't see Zhang Jin either. Instead, Xin Qingchun's voice sounded in his ears. "Kid, there are quite a few people here who are too strong for you. You should restrain yourself. Just now, there were quite a few people spying on you." Following his words, Xin Qingchun's illusory figure appeared in front of Du Xiaofu. 7 o'clock, the last 3 hours. Brothers who still have fresh flowers, please give them to me. Little you, continue to write. Tomorrow, continue to erupt. Chapter 426. There seems to be quite a number of martial king experts in the Imperial Dragon City. Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes. Just now, outside the Du residence, he had also detected quite a number of obscure auras. Those auras should all be at the martial king level. Although that girl Du Xiaoqing is powerful, it's still better to be careful. In the imperial capital of an empire, there may be hidden martial emperor experts. If you provoke them, you'll have to bear the consequences, Xin Qingchun said. Du Xiaofu shrugged his shoulders, smiled slightly, and did not speak. As night fell, the streets of the imperial capital were still bustling with people. Ouyang Shuang had finally returned to the inn. Upon seeing Du Xiaofu, Ouyang Shuang's large and beautiful eyes tightly stared at Du Xiaofu, an extraordinary splendor blossoming in her beautiful eyes. She was slightly shocked as she said, "Truly, wherever you go, trouble will follow. Even the Du household has been swept away by you. Congratulations, you've only been in the capital for a day, and your name has already shaken the capital. Your name is already well known outside." Du Xiaofu bitterly smiled, looked at Ouyang Shuang and said, "I originally only wanted to take a look at the Du residence. I didn't intend to do anything. Who knew that the guard wouldn't let me see?" In a moment of anger, I replied, and the Du residents took the initiative to attack. They kept pestering me, so, okay, no need to explain. It's fine as long as you're fine. Ouyang Shuang's beautiful eyebrows slightly relaxed. She also knew why Du Xiaofu wanted to go to the Du residence. Back then, the matter of his family being forced to separate might have something to do with the Du residence. In his heart, he already felt that the Du residence was inseparable from the matter that caused his family to be separated. He couldn't let go of his heart, so he wanted to go to the Du residence to take a look. That was why he fought with the Du residence in a moment of anger. Fortunately, he was fine now, so she was relieved. As her voice faded, Ouyang Shuang's beautiful eyes trembled. She continued to look at Du Xiaofu with a faint trace of worry in her eyes. Today, because of Xiaoqing, the Du residents did not dare to do anything. But this time, you've completely offended the Du residents. You have to be careful in the future. Yes, I understand. Du Xiaofu nodded, but in any case, he didn't plan to have too much involvement with the Du household. In the future, he estimated that there wouldn't be many opportunities to bump into the Du household. Is Zhang Jin here yet? Ouyang Shuang got down to business. No. Du Xiaofu shook his head. He hadn't seen Zhang Jin since he came back. That's strange. Ouyang Shuang's pretty eyebrows were filled with suspicion. Calculating the time, Zhang Jin should have been able to find out the news long ago. With the Academy's badge, it would not be too difficult for Zhang Jin to find their lodging. Her red lips parted slightly. Her expression was somewhat worried as she softly said, "They have not come to find us even though it is already so late. Could something have happened? Let's wait and see," Du Xiaofu said. At this moment, they could only wait. After all, this matter was between the Li family and the Qian family. It would not be good to directly barge into the Li family. If they barged into the Li family, it would be even more difficult to clean up. They could only wait for Zhang Jin to bring back news. In the room, after Du Xiaofu and Ouyang Shuang chatted for a while, Ouyang Shuang returned to the room next door. She and Du Xiaoqing shared a room, while Du Xiaofu, Du Xiaoyao and Little Tiger naturally shared a room. Night shrouded the sky. It was the end of the month. Tonight, the moon was dim and the stars were bright. The night was hazy and dusky. In the dark night, a black figure streaked across the sky. Without a trace of fluctuation, he quietly appeared on the roof of the guest inn. Like a ghost, he flashed and disappeared without a trace. Outside the window of a guest room, the black figure bent over and looked through the gap of the window. In the dim room, the light was extinguished. On the bed, a young man in a purple robe with a purple broadsword on his back was sitting cross-legged. He was adjusting his breathing and did not notice the black figure's approach. "Kid, we don't know each other, and we have no grudges. However, for the sake of the Wolf Fawn Escort Agency, I have no choice but to sacrifice you." The black figure's head was covered with a black robe. He gently pushed open the door, his eyes flashing. "Chi!" Suddenly, the black figure was like a flash of lightning. In an instant, he appeared in front of the young man in a purple robe who was sitting cross-legged on the bed. A fierce claw was immediately grabbed at the young man in a purple robe. Runes flashed. If this claw were to land, it would be enough to crush the young man into pieces. "Robbery!" Suddenly, a clear and delicate voice rang out. The black figure's claw was about to land on the young man in a purple robe. However, at this critical moment, a green lightning suddenly flashed behind him. The entire space suddenly froze, causing him to be unable to move. "Oh no, there's a strong person!" The black figure's face changed. He was shocked as if he had a premonition. However, at the same time, it was already too late for him to dodge. His shoulder trembled and a terrifying force surged. A slender claw was directly grabbed at his body. A terrifying force directly destroyed the profound chi in his body. His fierce rune claw was shattered. Then, the profound chi in his body stopped and was instantly restrained. Chi! The room was brightly lit. Outside the door, a petite and tall lady walked in and gently closed the door. Her peerless face and cold temperament made it impossible for strangers to enter. The black figure looked around. At this moment, there was a black kitten and a golden little macaque in the room. 4 pairs of eyes glanced at him indifferently. He did not know why, but the 4 pairs of eyes made his hair stand on end. The black kitten's gaze, in particular, made the black-clothed figure's hair stand on end. "Quick, hand over the Qiankun bag." Du Xiaoqing's face appeared in front of the black figure. Her pure and innocent eyes were currently filled with the expectation of robbery. She extended her hand and lifted the black robe of the black figure, revealing his scarred face. He was over 40 years old and had a muscular body that was yellowish. He gave off an explosive aura and the scar on his face made him look even more ferocious. However, at this moment, he was like a little chick in front of an eagle while being detained by Du Xiaoqing. "Little Qing, you've restrained him. How is he going to give you the Qiankun bag?" On the bed, Du Xiaofu opened his gently shut eyes. A faint glow flickered within them as he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His body immediately leaped off the bed as his gaze landed on the large scarred man. That gradually clear gaze of his caused the large scarred man's heart to emit an uneasy feeling for no reason. "That's true. Then I'll take it myself." Du Xiaoqing smiled and immediately nodded her head. She directly took out the Qiankun bag from the large scarred man's chest. Looking at Du Xiaoqing, the large scarred man's eyes trembled. This seemingly slender and delicate girl was actually a terrifying expert. He was like an ant that could not be contended with. Only at this moment did he understand why Liu had asked him for help and not the experts of the Li family. Perhaps Liu had specially set him up. "Who are you and why do you want to kill me?" Du Xiaofu looked at the large scarred man and asked in an indifferent manner. A martial marquis of the mysterious level should not be an ordinary person. During the day, Du Xiaofu had already noticed that someone was secretly following him. Sure enough, someone was secretly trying to harm him at night. This caused a chill to appear in Du Xiaofu's eyes. A person who could make a martial marquis of the mysterious level assassinate him would not have a simple background. He did not know who would bear such a grudge against him. Since I've been captured by you, kill me if you want. This time, I've been tricked. I asked for it if I lost my life. The large scarred man looked at Du Xiaofu. His scarred face twitched slightly. This time, he had failed miserably. How could these people let him go? Since he was going to die, he might as well die quickly. If you don't say it, I have more than 100 ways to make you say it. Why do you have to suffer? Ouyang Shuang looked at the large scarred man with a cold temperament. No one would suspect that behind that beautiful face, there was no mercy. The large scarred man looked at Ouyang Shuang. After a moment of silence, he opened his mouth and said, My name is Dark Wolf, the head of the Wolf Fang Escort Agency. The third young master of the Li family, Li Yu, asked me to come. Li Yu? Hearing this name, Ouyang Shuang frowned slightly. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu was not too surprised. He looked at Dark Wolf and asked, He asked you to kill us? To make you disappear and hand the 2 girls over to him. Dark Wolf replied. At this point, there was no need to hide anything. Moreover, he did not have much of a relationship with Li Yu. Hearing Dark Wolf's words, Du Xiaofu's gaze wavered. He looked at Dark Wolf and continued to ask, With your cultivation and strength, you don't have to risk your life for him, right? This is just a condition. He's just a second generation. He doesn't have the qualifications to make me risk my life for him. I promised to help him settle this matter, and he handed over the business of the Li family to my Wolf Fang Escort Agency. That's all, Dark Wolf said in a deep voice. If it wasn't for the Wolf Fang Escort Agency, why would he care about a second generation like Li Yu? I don't care about the reason. You wanted to kill me. Now that you've fallen into my hands, I naturally won't let you go. This is very fair. Du Xiaofu took a deep breath and exhaled. He looked at Dark Wolf and said, Tell me a reason to let you live. Otherwise, I don't mind taking your life. Dark Wolf looked at Du Xiaofu. He had lived a life of licking blood from the edge of the blade. He was experienced and knowledgeable. From this purple-robed young man, he felt a faint murderous aura that only existed in people who had been baptized by killing. This proved that this young man was definitely not comparable to those second generations in the imperial capital. Therefore, Dark Wolf did not doubt this young man's words. To be honest, he did not want to die. Except for those who wanted to commit suicide, no one would want to die. He was no exception. Chapter 427. Immobilized by Du Xiaoqing's restraints, the Dark Wolf stared at Du Xiaofu, twitching inwardly as he said, If you don't kill me, my life is yours from now on. I accept this reason. Remember, from now on, your life is mine. Du Xiaofu nodded and then gestured to Du Xiaoqing, saying, Little Qing, let him go. Hearing this, Du Xiaoqing released the restraints in her hands. The Dark Wolf stared at Du Xiaofu, confusion in his eyes, as if he had not expected the other to let him go so easily. Feeling a little uneasy, he asked, You're willing to believe me so easily? I choose to believe you. Du Xiaofu gazed at the Dark Wolf, a faint smile on his lips, but there was a hint of coldness in this smile. He said, Because if you are not worthy of my trust, I can take your life at any time. At that time, you will suffer a fate worse than death. Hearing Du Xiaofu's final words, the Dark Wolf felt a chill in his heart. At night, the stars twinkled in the sky. A figure leapt out from a guest inn, streaking across the sky like a ghost, and then disappearing into the night. Protector King's Manor Du family. In the great hall, a large group of elders and burly men with extraordinary auras were now mostly pale, looking wretched and extremely disheveled. That Du Xiaofu actually dared to go against the main tribe. We must not let him go. Going against the main tribe is treason. We must not tolerate it. Who would have thought that Du Dingshuan's son would actually be so powerful? With that mysterious beast girl by his side, it will not be easy to deal with that brat. Du Xiaofu's wings have already formed. If we can take him into our Du family, it will undoubtedly benefit our Du family. A pair of father and son from a branch clan. Each of them is stronger than the other. I reckon they must have obtained a great opportunity. Maybe some treasure has appeared in the branch clan. We have underestimated them. I reckon that some treasure must have appeared in the branch clan. That father and son pair are too bizarre. We should go to the branch clan and take a look. If our main clan can obtain that treasure, that would be the true glory of our clan. Someone suggested that they should go to Stone City's Du family to take a look. Stone City's Du family had produced a terrifying pair of father and son. Perhaps a treasure had appeared in the branch family. If the main family could obtain it, the Du family would definitely flourish. I think we should go to Stone City and take a look. That pair of father and son are both extraordinarily strong. How could such talents appear in the branch clan? There must be something special about the branch clan. The suggestion of that person was met with the agreement of many people. In fact, some of their gazes were even filled with greed. The thought of the innate gifts of that father and son duo, as well as the horrifying beasts that were following them around, was enough to cause one's eyes to turn red. Everyone, can't we think of a way to get Du Xiaofu to join our clan? With his talent, it would be a pity to let him go. A burly man said with a dignified look. That Du Xiaofu is related to that colossus. How can we get involved with him? At that time, we will definitely bring disaster to our entire clan. Today, that Du Xiaofu dared to go against our main clan. This is already treason and heresy. How can we tolerate this? Night fell, and the sky was dotted with sparkling stars. It was like the Milky Way laid on the blue sky, and the faint moonlight illuminated the magnificent palace. I didn't expect that fierce little guy to come to Dragon City. He's really fierce. Turns out he's from Stone City's Du family. Du Tingxian also came from there. Inside the palace, there was a middle-aged man wearing a dragon robe. His eyes were like torches. He was quite fat and had a big belly. Although he wasn't very tall, he had a majestic aura that made people feel intimidated. Inside the palace, a woman dressed in an orange-red outfit stood quietly. Her tall and slender legs and slim waist outlined a moving arc. Her elegant temperament was a little cold, and she exuded a nobility that made people not dare to approach her. Her red lips slightly opened as she murmured softly. Has he come to Dragon City, Imperial Father? What is the origin of Stone City's Du family? The alluring woman was the eldest princess of the Stone Dragon Empire, Cheng Xingnan. As the eldest princess of the Stone Dragon Empire, she didn't know much about a small and remote city like Stone City. Stone City is a small border city at the edge of the barbaric Beast Mountain Range. My Qing family has an ancestral rule that we can't meddle in the affairs of Stone City. It is said that the Protector King's mansion's Du family came from Stone City. And now, there's a Du family that has the same bloodline as the Du family. It is said that a super expert came from Stone City in the past. The dragon-robed middle-aged man's every movement was filled with the aura of an emperor as he said. 20 years ago, a young man called Du Tingxian appeared out of nowhere in Stone City. His talent was astonishing, but in the end, he brought about a great calamity for the Du family. I have received news that this Du Xiaofu is Du Dingshuan's son, and he comes from Stone City's Du family. Du Tingxian and Du Xiaofu are both related to the Du family. Qing Xingnan's brows were slightly furrowed. Her appearance was extremely beautiful, and there was some fluctuation in her eyes. Her body's curves were hazy and undulating, and there was an irresistible temptation in her clear coldness. It was unknown how many men would pursue such a woman. Xingnan, how are the arrangements? We can't make any mistakes this time. The people from the Tianhu Empire won't be simple. The man in the dragon robe said softly. His torch-like eyes were rippling with worry. Qing Xingnan nodded and said, The arrangements are almost done. The younger generation of the various kings' mansions have rushed back. We will be able to fight in 3 days. Sigh, I hope we can resist them this time. The man in the dragon robe narrowed his eyes. He then raised his head to look at Qing Xingnan and said, How is the divine court? Ever since the incident at the Tianwu Academy, the divine court has been the same. The Tianhu Empire is a force of the Sky Snake sect. This time, it is rumored that there are extraordinary people from the Tianhu Empire and the Sky Snake sect. However, this is a matter between the Stone Dragon Empire and the Tianhu Empire, so the divine court can't interfere this time. Qing Xingnan said. The divine court is probably trying to intimidate the Tianhu Empire. The man in the dragon robe paced with his hands behind his back. Qing Xingnan opened her mouth and said, "Father, you don't have to worry too much. Although the people from the Tianhu Empire are extraordinary, the general of the Jiang family and Gu Xinyan of the Gu family have just come out of the Tianwuxiu realm. Their strength should have improved tremendously. They might be able to resist. The Tianhu Empire has extraordinary people from the Sky Snake sect, but the Du family still has 2 people. They might be able to stop them. The Du family. I hope they can stop them this time." The man in the dragon robe frowned slightly. After a while, his torch-like eyes flickered slightly. He said to Qing Xingnan, "You went to the Tianwu Academy last time. Are you familiar with Du Xiaofu?" Hearing this, Qing Xingnan's bright eyes trembled inwardly. At this moment, she seemed to have thought of something. Her delicate hand involuntarily went to her perky butt. She suppressed the anger on her beautiful face and said to the man in the dragon robe, "Father, I don't have any interactions with that brat. Perhaps my second sister is more familiar with my third brother." "Is that so?" The man in the dragon robe raised his head slightly and said softly, "Since that's the case, let your second sister find that brat tomorrow. Speaking of which, I have met his father several times. He can be considered the son of an old friend. Since I've come to the Dragon City, I naturally have to meet him. Father, that Du Xiaofu just caused a ruckus in the Du family today. If you want to meet that Du Xiaofu tomorrow, I'm afraid the outside world will think too much." Qing Xingnan said with a frown. "I only want to meet the son of an old friend. If the outsiders want to think that way, then so be it." The man in the dragon robe smiled faintly. Although there were no fluctuations of aura coming from his body, at this moment, no one dared to look directly at him. Qing Xingnan raised her eyebrows and a trace of surprise flashed across her bright eyes. She then nodded her head and the corner of her lips curled up into a charming smile. Her smile was so moving that it could cause the downfall of a country. She raised her head and said to the man in the dragon robe, "I understand. I'll look for my second sister tomorrow to make the arrangements. Stinking brat, last time, you ruined my sex's important matter and seriously injured my junior brother Guyu, causing me to be punished. In the barbaric Beast Mountain range, you even disrespected me. This time, don't let me find an opportunity otherwise." Qing Xingnan raised her eyebrows and pouted her delicate red lips. She thought about the secret place that had never been touched by the xenomorph. She still didn't know if that stinking brat had other tricks up his sleeve. In short, she couldn't let that guy off so easily. Chapter 428. So that brat is related to the Du family. What a surprise. That old fellow from the Du family must be having a headache now. In the bamboo forest shrouded by the faint moonlight at night, a skinny and tan old man gently reclined on a bamboo chair. He smiled slightly, appearing extremely happy. Then, as if recalling something, he said, "It's a pity that the old fellow from the Du family seems to be in closed-door training. If he were here, it would definitely be even more lively. Grandpa, the Du family has been dealt a heavy blow today. If you are so happy, others might think that you are taking pleasure in their misfortune." In the bamboo forest, a charming girl smiled faintly. Her charming hair was casually tied into a loose bun, with a light purple flower inserted diagonally. She did not wear any makeup, and her red lips were not dyed red. "What are you afraid of? Seeing the Du family suffer, so what if I am happy? Who would dare to be dissatisfied?" The old man smiled. On his skinny and tanned face, his eyes were bright without any turbidity. He looked at the charming girl and said, "That brat is really fierce. I am liking him more and more. It's a pity that you are not moved. If only we could make that brat a member of our Xia family. At that time, that old fellow from the Du family would probably die of indignation. Grandpa, I have already said that he is still a little boy. The girl's beautiful eyes flickered as she smiled sweetly, revealing her cleverness. Cough, cough. The old man suddenly coughed. His breathing was disorderly, appearing extremely uncomfortable. His withered chest heaved up and down, as if his ribs would break at any moment. Grandpa, how are you? The girl's expression changed, her face full of worry. It's an old problem. There will be a day when that happens. After the old man coughed a few times, he stabilized his breathing. Then, he looked at the charming girl and said, Girl, go find that brat tomorrow. Coming to the Imperial City is also fate. I want to meet that brat. All right. The charming girl nodded. She knew what her grandpa meant. It was likely that he did not just want to meet him, but more so for the future of the Xia family. In the night, a figure silently appeared in the Li family residence, then quietly entered the Li family residence and disappeared. In the inner courtyard of the Li family, in an exquisite courtyard. Within a room, a rather heroic middle-aged man and a woman who emitted the aura of a lady from a wealthy family were looking at a delicate and pretty girl. The light in their eyes sighed slightly. Father, mother, let me go. Don't tell me that you're also going to watch cousin Li Shui fall into the fire pit. In the room, Zhang Jin sat upright. However, her body was obviously sealed by a restriction placed on her acupoints. She was unable to move. Shui is my most beloved niece. For the sake of the entire Li family, I have no other choice. Your second uncle is also very upset. It's a pity that the Li family is not strong enough, so he has no choice but to lower his head. The woman looked at Zhang Jin and sighed. Don't go out and cause trouble. When you attend the wedding tomorrow, I will naturally let you go. Creak. With that, the middle-aged man and the woman pushed open the door and left, leaving Zhang Jin alone in the room. This is troublesome. Is there really no way to change it? Zhang Jin sighed. Her body was restricted, and she couldn't move at all. Even if she wanted to leave the Li family, she couldn't. Chi. Suddenly, the door opened slightly, and a figure appeared in the room like a ghost. He was wearing a long black robe, and his face was covered in it. Zhang Jin raised her head and her eyes flickered. It's me. The black robe was lifted, revealing a purple-robed young man carrying a mysterious broadsword on his back. A small golden macaque was perched on his shoulder. It was Du Xiaofu and Du Xiaoyao. Without any news of Zhang Jin and the fact that Li Yu had sent people to ambush him, Du Xiaofu felt that something was amiss. Thus, he had Xiao Hu, Ouyang Shuang, and Du Xiaoqing wait in the tavern while he sneaked into the Li family with Du Xiaoyao. With Tianwu Academy's emblem on him, it was easy for him to find Zhang Jin. Zhang Jin's appearance was just as Du Xiaofu had expected. Something had indeed happened. Junior Du, why are you here? Upon seeing Du Xiaofu, the shock in Zhang Jin's eyes turned into joy. I guessed that you were in trouble, so I came to take a look. Du Xiaofu undid the seal on Zhang Jin's body and frowned. What happened? Li Yu discovered my intentions. He eavesdropped on my conversation with cousin Li Shui and knew that I was persuading cousin Li Shui to leave. Thus, he informed the elders and sealed me. Zhang Jin said. How is Li Shui now? Du Xiaofu asked with a slight frown. Perhaps, we came for nothing. Zhang Jin sighed. Her eyes were filled with sorrow and helplessness. From Zhang Jin's mouth, Du Xiaofu learned that Zhang Jin had already met Li Shui and explained the purpose of her visit to Li Shui. However, Li Shui had already insisted on compromising. She only asked Zhang Jin to thank Du Xiaofu and Ouyang Shuang for their kindness. In a continuous courtyard, in a beautiful and fragrant girl's room, a charming and seductive figure stood in front of the window. The curves of her body were moving. She raised her head slightly and looked at the crescent moon in the sky. The light in her eyes was faint, making one's heart ache. Creak. The door was pushed open and a figure walked in. The woman did not turn her head. She opened her mouth and looked out of the window. She softly said, Father, I know the Li family's situation. I also know Uncle's difficulties and your reluctance. This is enough. Everything is my choice. I will not blame anyone. Since this matter was caused by me, I should bear the responsibility. Senior Li Shui, it's me. A faint voice sounded. When the enchanting lady heard this, her alluring body trembled as though it had been electrocuted. This caused her originally exquisite and curvaceous body to become even more perfect and alluring at this moment. She immediately turned her head around and a resolute and determined familiar face appeared in front of her eyes. Her tender red lips opened a couple of times before she exclaimed in shock, "Junior Du, why have you come?" I snuck in. Du Xiaofu shrugged his shoulders. Since it was already so late, he could only sneak in. After Li Shui recovered from her shock, she had already heard about what happened in Tianwu Academy. She looked at Du Xiaofu and pursed her lips into a smile. Even though there was a hint of bitterness in her smile, it was still an extremely charming smile. She said, "With your current strength, if you want to force your way in, no one in the Li family will be able to stop you, right? I'm not here to snatch the bride. It won't be good if I force my way in." Du Xiaofu smiled apologetically with an awkward look on his face. "If you're here to snatch the bride, I will definitely leave with you without any hesitation." Li Shui looked at Du Xiaofu with her rosy lips slightly pouting. Her gaze trembled and there was a hint of anticipation in her eyes. Du Xiaofu was taken aback. He scratched the back of his head awkwardly. "Puchi." Li Shui chuckled and the anticipation in her eyes disappeared. It was replaced by loneliness as she looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "No matter what, thank you for coming. Cousin Zhang Jin has already told me about it, and I know the purpose of your visit. However, this matter was caused by me and I have to take responsibility for it. There are thousands of people in the Li family and I can't allow them to be implicated because of me. Have you really made up your mind?" Du Xiaofu looked at Li Shui and said, "If you want to leave, I can bring you with me. As long as we reach the academy, the Qian family won't be able to do anything to you. Bring me with you." Li Shui looked at Du Xiaofu and her eyes flickered. "What will happen to the Li family after I leave?" Du Xiaofu naturally knew the reason for Li Shui's worry. He didn't know what to say for a moment. After hesitating for a moment, he said to Li Shui, "If I tell the Li family, maybe I can help? Junior Du, I know that you have a good reputation in the empire. If you go and find my father and uncle personally, they will have to consider it. They might agree." Li Shui looked at Du Xiaofu and her eyes flickered. "But the Li family is in the imperial capital. The foundation of the Li family is in the imperial capital. You can protect me, but what about the entire Li family? The power of the Qian family is not to be underestimated. At that time, I will become the sinner of the Li family. I know Junior Du's strength is tyrannical, but this is the imperial capital where experts are as common as clouds. The foundation of the Qian family is deeper than my Li family, and there is another huge monster behind them. All of this was caused by me, so I naturally have to bear the responsibility. Have you really made up your mind?" Du Xiaofu sighed. "If only you were from the Du household. Everything would be different with just a word from you." A bitter smile appeared on Li Shui's charming face. Du Xiaofu's surname was also Du. If he was from the Du household, just a word from him would be enough to protect the entire Li family. At that time, the Qian family could only obey his orders. Unfortunately, he wasn't from the Du household. For the entire Li family, she had no other choice. Du household. Du Xiaofu smiled faintly and said to Li Shui, "I'm not from the Du household, but I'm from the World Society. Come with me. If you join the World Society, perhaps it won't be long before you can protect the entire Li family." Du Xiaofu knew that the current strength of the World Society was definitely not weak. With the 6-star Spirit Talisman Master, Medicine King Yiwuming, and the Eagle King Gong Dao, a Martial King expert, even in the Imperial capital, it was an absolute lineup. But Du Xiaofu knew that if he wanted to protect Li Shui, whether it was the World Society or himself, it wouldn't be too big of a problem. No matter how strong the Qian family was, they probably didn't have a king-level expert. Even if there was a king-level expert, there was still Du Xiaoqing. But if he wanted to protect the entire Li family, Being in the imperial capital, the world society couldn't do it. He also couldn't do it. And all of this, he didn't have any reason to interfere. Everything depended on Li Shui. Chapter 429. World Society. Li Shui smiled, not minding it too much. She turned back and stood quietly by the window. After a long time, she said to Du Xiaofu, "Perhaps this is fate. I can only accept it. Everything happened because of me, so I should bear the responsibility." "Thank you." "Everything happened because of me as well." Du Xiaofu sighed. If he hadn't been too heavy-handed, perhaps Li Shui wouldn't have to face such a situation. But even so, Du Xiaofu didn't regret his actions. This was somewhat contradictory, but it wasn't a conflict. "You can't be blamed for this. I've thought about it carefully these past few days. The main fault lies with me. I knew his temper, but I still provoked him. He brought this upon himself. I also have a responsibility that I can't shirk away from." Li Shui smiled bitterly. During this period of time, she had thought about many things. Back then, she didn't have any feelings for Qianguyu, and she was extremely annoyed by his actions. But no matter what, Qianguyu had been very attentive to her. The current situation was also caused by her. If she hadn't known about Qianguyu's personality, and intentionally dragged Du Xiaofu into this, perhaps things wouldn't have turned out this way. Li Shui said softly, "Perhaps I also owe Qianguyu. Now that I've married into the Qian clan, I hope that everything will be resolved." Du Xiaofu didn't say anything else. He didn't know what else to say. A moment later, he bid farewell to Li Shui and turned to leave with Du Xiaoyao. "If you're really here to snatch the bride, then I..." Li Shui's eyes flickered as she watched Du Xiaofu leave. The next morning, when the first ray of morning light broke through the shackles of the clouds in the eastern horizon and was projected onto the enormous imperial city, Dragon City, many people gradually surged out on the empty streets. Clamoring noises rang out, and the enormous city woke up and began a new day. In a room of the Li clan, a middle-aged man stood quietly. He looked at Li Shui with teary eyes and gritted his teeth. "Shui, why don't you just go back to Tianwu Academy? No one can do anything to you there. Father will take care of the Qian clan's matters." "Father, this isn't a grievance." "Don't worry, I'm fine," Li Shui said softly. Her eyes revealed a faint smile, but no one could see the sadness hidden in them. Early in the morning, Du Xiaofu, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, opened his eyes, and Li Shui, editor, Tennis Shui. "What do you plan? Have you thought?" Oh Yanshuang's words. Li Shui. "Of course, Li. Du Xiaofu Li, Du Li. Today is a joyous occasion for the Qian clan. There must be many famous people in the capital. Why don't we go and take a look? I would like to take this opportunity to meet the famous people in the capital. Otherwise, my trip to the capital would have been a waste." Du Xiaofu looked at Oh Yanshuang with a smile. "Are you really going to the Qian clan?" Oh Yanshuang stared blankly at Du Xiaofu. She knitted her brows and said, "You should know that if the people from the Qian clan see you, they won't let you off. Today is a joyous occasion for the Qian clan. They shouldn't make things difficult for me. There's no harm in going and taking a look," Du Xiaofu replied. "All right, I'll go with you. I hope that the Qian clan won't end up like the Du clan yesterday." Oh Yanshuang sighed. She couldn't help but worry. Du Xiaofu smiled bitterly and said, "Don't worry, I won't cause any trouble." "Great, we can go and play again. Are we going to attend a wedding?" Du Xiaoqing happily twirled in circles. Her green dress couldn't hide her alluring curves. On her young face, there was a pure and innocent look in her eyes. Who could imagine that such a harmless-looking girl would be terrifying to the extreme once she was angered? Today, the Qian clan was filled with a joyous atmosphere. Large red lanterns were hung up high, embellishing the vast Qian clan. However, within this joyous atmosphere, it was not difficult for one to feel a faint sadness and regret. But no matter what, the joyous occasion for the Qian clan was an extraordinarily lively event for the entire capital. Moreover, the marriage alliance was a similarly large clan, the Li clan. This made the atmosphere even livelier. The Qian clan was originally a first-rate clan within the capital, Dragon City. They had been rising in the capital for a long time. Later on, the younger brother of the Du King married the younger sister of the head of the Qian clan, causing the Qian clan and the Du King to become in-laws. Hence, this caused the status of the Qian clan to rise. They were already vaguely known as the number one clan below the 8 great king palaces. After this marriage alliance with the Li clan, there was no doubt that the Qian clan would become the number one clan below the 8 great king palaces. As the sky gradually brightened, the interior of the Qian clan gradually became lively. In the end, it was practically filled with a sea of people. The Qian clan was originally a large faction, and there were countless people who came to congratulate them. Although there was a faint sense of helplessness and regret in this joyous occasion, the joyous sounds still resounded throughout the sky from early morning. As time passed, the number of guests increased, and the joyous sounds became increasingly dense. Today is a joyous occasion for the Qian clan and the Li clan. The marriage alliance between the two clans will undoubtedly increase their strength greatly. In the future, other than the 8 great king palaces, no other faction will be able to deal with the Qian clan and the Li clan. However, I heard that there's a secret behind this marriage alliance. It's said that Chang Guyu's cultivation was crippled by the terrifying Du Xiaofu in Tianwu Academy, and has become a cripple. This matter seems to have something to do with Li Shui from the Li clan. That's why the two clans decided to have this marriage alliance. Du Xiaofu. I heard that the terrifying Du Xiaofu caused a ruckus in the Du King Palace yesterday. Could his arrival in Dragon City be related to Li Shui from the Li clan? If Du Xiaofu really destroyed Qianguyu and appeared in the imperial capital, I'm afraid the Qian family won't let him go. That's not necessarily true. Yesterday, even the experts from the Du King Palace were swept away by Du Xiaofu. What can the Qian clan do? I'm afraid that the terrifying Du Xiaofu doesn't come to the Qian clan. Amidst the jubilant atmosphere, the place was bustling with activity. Among the densely packed guests, there were groups of 3 to 5 people. Some guests had also gathered together, and were discussing various things that they had heard about. Around the Qian clan, there were many experts dressed in martial arts attire. Their bodies emitted a bloody aura, and they were all elites of the Qian clan. The weaker cultivators didn't dare to get close to them, and those who were the exceptions didn't dare to speak too loudly. The vastly clan was grand and majestic. At this moment, there were several figures sitting in the main hall. Chang Guyu's father, the Qian clan's patriarch, Qian Qian, was personally accompanying him on the wedding day. Qian Qian looked to be in his 50s. He was tall and strong, and as a patriarch of the Qian clan, he was definitely an influential figure in the empire. He had the aura of a superior, which made people feel reverence in their hearts. At the main guest seat in the hall, there was an extraordinarily handsome middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. He had a dignified appearance and exuded a noble aura. Beside him, there were several burly men and young men who had extraordinary auras. I didn't expect the second master of King Ouyang's mansion to come in person. Your presence brings light to the Qian clan's humble dwelling. Please forgive me if I have neglected you. Qian Qian felt flattered in front of the dignified middle-aged man. He didn't expect that King Ouyang's mansion, which had always been difficult to get close to, would come to congratulate him on his son's wedding. Moreover, the second master of King Ouyang's mansion had come in person. This was a great honor. You're too kind, Patriarch Qian. I came uninvited, please don't be offended. The middle-aged man said indifferently. His gestures were extraordinary. The guests from King Ouyang's mansion have arrived. The guests from King Gu's mansion have arrived. The guests from Ghost King's mansion have arrived. The guests from Wu King's mansion have arrived. The guests from King Hua's mansion have arrived. At this moment, a series of loud shouts suddenly came from outside the hall. Even the voices were trembling. Then, it obviously caused a huge commotion outside. The faces of the people from King Ouyang's mansion changed slightly. At this moment, Qian Qian was undoubtedly the most shocked. His whole body trembled slightly. The Ghost King's Mansion, Wu King's Mansion, King Gu's Mansion, King Gu's Mansion, and King Zhang's Mansion. These 5 kings' mansions were not people that the Qian clan could make friends with easily. Today, other than King Ouyang's mansion, there were guests from the 5 kings' mansions. How could he not be shocked and delighted? Looks like Patriarch Qian has a lot of guests. The dignified middle-aged man smiled slightly. He was also surprised. Perhaps my son is a classmate of the younger generation from King General's mansion, Wu King's mansion, and the other kings' mansions. That's why they came to congratulate you. Please have a seat, second master. I'll be back soon. Qian stood up and apologized. The guests from the 5 kings' mansions came at the same time. He had to welcome any of them. How could he dare to neglect them? It's okay. I think the bride should be here soon. I'll go out for a walk and wait to meet the bride. The middle-aged man stood up with a smile and planned to go out for a walk. General Budian Shanhe, Jade Maiden Ling Xian Gu Xingyan, Ghost Child 9 Nether Jr., Netherworld Princess Wu Kei, Heaven Luo's Sword Gua Xiaofeng. I didn't expect them to all come. It's said that they were ranked in the top 5 of Tianwu Academy's martial ranking back then. They possess frightening talent and extraordinary strength. Despite their young age, they have already surpassed many seniors. Who would have thought that the Qian clan's wedding would have so many kings attending? It seems like the Qian clan is going to prosper this time. The interior of the Qian family was bustling with activity. There was a commotion among the densely packed well-wishers. Following the arrival of a few extraordinary young men and women in the crowd, the entire festive scene immediately became a little chaotic. In the surroundings, there was a large group of young men and women. Their gazes all landed on the most extraordinary young men and women. If Du Xiaofu was here, he would be able to recognize them from afar. The most extraordinary young men and women were the general, Ghost Child, Gu Xingyan, Wu Kei, and Gua Xiaofeng. The first day of the month, the first day of the book list. Little Yu continued to write. Chapter 430. Do you think that guy will really come to the Qian family today? A handsome young man in a black robe asked. It was Ghost Child. As far as I know, that guy didn't come to any of us yesterday. Instead, he went to the Li family and caused a ruckus in the Du family. I think he will come to the Qian family today. The general frowned. His face looked like a statue. The aura around him seemed to be able to suppress mountains and rivers. No one dared to approach him. Do you think that guy is here for Li Shui? Princess Netherworld looked at the general. She was dressed beautifully. Half of her breasts were covered, and her short skirt was wrapped around her hips. She was extremely seductive. Anyway, that guy shouldn't be here for the Tianhu Empire. Gu Xingyan's beautiful eyes didn't show much emotion. Her eyes were as clear as autumn water. Her body under her red dress was like a willow tree, light and soft. Her temperament was otherworldly. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was perfect. Welcome, my Qian family is honored to have you here. Qian Wen hurried over. He was extremely polite to the general, Gu Xingyan, Ghost Child, and the others. He didn't put on any airs and greeted them as equals. Not to mention the power behind these young men and women. Just the strength of these 5 young men and women was enough to make Qian Wen's heart tremble. We are classmates of Qian Guyu and Li Shui. As classmates, it is only right for us to come and congratulate you on this joyous occasion. Gu Xingyan said softly. Her every move was like a pure white flower on the misty celestial mountain, untainted by the mortal world. Everyone could understand what Gu Xingyan meant. They did not come here on behalf of the Wang mansion, but as private individuals. But this wasn't important. To the Qian family, the outside world had seen his son's wedding. Other than the Xia family, the other 7 Wang families had come. This was enough. At this moment, Qian Wen's heart was filled with joy. If Qian Guyu was still intact, it would be the greatest occasion for the Qian family. From then on, the Qian family would be able to prosper. Unfortunately, now, looking at the joyous and lively scene around her, the smile on her face revealed the heartache. Her eyes involuntarily narrowed as a faint cold glint flashed across them. The groom has arrived! Inside the Qian clan, a young man wearing a wedding robe came out of the inner hall, surrounded by many young people. It was Qian Guiyu of the Qian clan, the main character of the day. He had a tall and sturdy figure, an extraordinary temperament, and a handsome face. However, there wasn't much of a smile on his face, and he didn't even respond to the congratulations of the people around him. I can't feel any aura fluctuations. Could it be that he has really become a cripple? Many people in the crowd were curious, but they couldn't sense any aura fluctuations from Qian Guiyu's body. After Wan Wan greeted the general and the others, he naturally couldn't get along with the group of youngsters, so he tactfully left. He had a face full of smiles as he chatted with the surrounding guests who came to congratulate him. With the prestige of the Qian family and the backing of the Du household, almost all of the major powers and families of the imperial capital had come today. There were many powers and families that were not much weaker than the Qian family, so he could not afford to be negligent. You're all here? Qian Guiyu appeared in front of the general, Gui Hua, Guo Xiaofeng, Gu Xinyan, and Wu Quebec. When the general and the others saw Qian Guiyu's pale complexion, they couldn't help but sigh and feel a little awkward. It's your wedding. We can be considered as classmates, Gu Xinyan said softly. Gu Xinyan said softly. She did not know what to say to Qian Guiyu. Guo Xiaofeng stepped forward and patted Qian Guiyu's shoulder. He didn't say anything, and the others didn't know what to say either. For a cultivator, especially one with their talent and level, to suddenly become a cripple, they wouldn't be able to accept it either. However, Qian Guiyu had offended Du Xiaofu, so they couldn't say anything. No matter what the reason is, I'm grateful that you're all here. A bitter smile appeared on Qian Guiyu's face. Half a year ago, even though he knew he was weaker than the 5 people in front of him, he still felt that he was one of them. But now, standing in front of the 5 of them, Qian Guiyu knew that from now on, he wouldn't have any entanglements with them. They would walk different paths. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before these 5 people's names would resound throughout the empire, and they would become giants in their own right. And from then on, he could only sit quietly and wait for the Yellow Earth to arrive. Qian Guiyu had once wanted to become an expert, to dominate the world, to fight against the geniuses of the outside world. But with the destruction of the Divine Gate, all that was left was an empty shell. We've arrived at the Du household. Outside the gate of the Qian clan, a sound wave accompanied by profound energy came once again. It resounded within the Qian clan, and it was enough for everyone to hear it clearly. Outside the door, quite a number of people entered in a grandiose manner, which immediately attracted the attention of many people. Qian Si was also moved. He bid farewell to an old man who was chatting and immediately stood up to welcome them. The Du household was one of the 8 great palaces. Even though it was said that the Du household was swept away yesterday, it didn't affect the Du household's status and prestige. Outside the Qian residence, there were 20 to 30 people from the Du household. They all had extraordinary temperaments and powerful auras. The leader was a young man in his late 20s. He was dressed in white and had black hair. His hair and clothes were fluttering in the wind. His hair and clothes were not tied up or tied. They fluttered slightly in the wind, which set off his tall and slender figure. As the young man appeared, the surrounding space seemed to solidify. An invisible wave of energy rippled out. There was a faint luster flowing on the young man's extraordinary skin. His eyes flashed with 1,000 kinds of lightning, causing people to tremble. It's him. He actually came out. Dewey. He's Qian Guiyu's cousin. His mother is from the Qian family. It's appropriate for him to represent the Du household today. He finally came out of seclusion. The general, Gu Xinyan, Gui Hua, Wu Kei and Guo Xiaofeng were all moved by the appearance of the young man in white. Please come in. Where are your mother and father? Are they not back yet? Qian Si greeted him respectfully in front of his nephew. His nephew was one of the best in the younger generation of the Du household. He was the pride of the younger generation of the Du household. Because of this, his Qian family was regarded highly by the Du household. If there was a day when his nephew was able to soar into the sky and reach a new height, the entire Qian clan would definitely be able to receive his protection. My mother has been guarding the border with my father. So this time, the family specially sent me to congratulate you. The young man in white was neither servile nor overbearing. His bearing was extraordinary. The aura that faintly spread out from his body made the surrounding guests not dare to approach him. When you go back, help me thank the Du family. Qianxi looked at the young man in white and felt his aura. He was secretly shocked and said, Looks like a year's cultivation has reached a terrifying level. I'm afraid that no one in the same generation in the Empire can compare to him. I don't dare to say that, but there's still my big brother. As the young man in white spoke, a hint of pride appeared in his eyes. He had absolute confidence in his own strength. Other than his big brother, no one in the Empire could compare to him. Qianxi's eyes dimmed when he heard this. It's a pity that your cousin. I've heard about my cousin. Uncle, don't be too sad. If there's a chance, I'll take revenge for my cousin. The young man in white looked around and asked, Where's my cousin? As soon as he said those words, the black-haired young man began searching through the crowd. He immediately noticed Qiandiyu, who was dressed in a wedding robe. Taking a few steps forward, he arrived before Qiandiyu. Looking at the general, Gu Xinyan, Gui Hua, and the others, he remarked, You all seem to be quite strong. It seems like Tianwu Academy has its merits. Greetings, cousin. Qiandiyu bowed. Ever since he was young, he had been filled with admiration for his cousin. I've only come out of seclusion 2 days ago. I've heard about your matter, so don't be too sad. Dewey patted Qiandiyu's shoulder, and his eyes flashed like lightning. That Du Xiaofu, I'll settle old and new debts with him. Cousin, forget it. I'm fine like this, Qiandiyu said softly. The bride has arrived. Before Qiandiyu could finish his words, there was a commotion outside the door. As soon as the voice sounded, the noisy crowd quietened down and many gazes turned to the door. You quickly go and receive the bride, Qianxi said to Qiandiyu. Many members of the Qian clan also followed suit. Going out to receive the bride was a custom, and they couldn't be careless about it. Even if there was something behind this marriage, with the attention of the entire empire, it couldn't be done carelessly. Receiving the bride, Qiandiyu raised his head and took a deep breath. He looked at his wedding robe and his lips twitched. Then, under the escort of the members of the Qian clan, he walked out of the door. Quick, let's go and take a look at the bride. I heard that the bride is incomparably beautiful. Many guests also walked out, wanting to see the other main character of the day. Chapter 431. Following the arrival of the bride, the atmosphere in the Qian clan reached its peak. Countless cheers and shouts resounded throughout the Qian clan. Outside the gates of the Qian clan, hundreds of people were standing on top of majestic demonic beasts. Flying demonic beasts were hovering in the air, pulling the palanquin. Outside the palanquin, there were members of the Li clan sending the bride and groom off. Every one of them was brimming with joy. Some of them had hidden emotions in their eyes, but overall, they gave off a feeling of great joy. Groom, quickly lift the curtain, someone told Qiandiyu. Cheers and shouts resounded throughout the Qian clan. Outside the Qian clan, there was a public square. At this moment, a sea of people had come to watch the show. Among the crowd, even the general, Gu Xinyan, Gui Hua, Wu Kei, and Gui Xiaofeng were there. Qiandiyu was escorted by many young men. He slowly walked to the front of the palanquin. Looking at the blurry figure behind the red curtain, he didn't know why, but his body trembled. Finally, under the cheers of the crowd, he lifted the red curtain of the palanquin. He looked inside the palanquin, his eyes trembling with anticipation. Welcome the bride! A clear voice resounded outside the Qian clan. At this moment, countless eyes were fixed on the palanquin. In the Li clan, there were many young women on both sides of the palanquin. Zhang Jin was one of them. Under the gazes of the crowd, a woman in a red wedding dress slowly walked out of the palanquin. Her face was completely covered by a red curtain. She was immediately surrounded by dozens of young women. She was like a moon surrounded by stars. Although the red curtain covered her face, it wasn't difficult for the crowd to see that under the wedding dress was a graceful curve. It was enchanting and breathtaking. Li Shui's beauty had long been famous in the imperial capital. Now that Qianguyu had married her, it immediately attracted countless envious gazes. "Congratulations, groom!" At that moment, the bride came out, and countless people congratulated Qianguyu, their voices sounding like a tidal wave. Today was the day of his son's wedding. Everyone in the imperial capital had gathered here. Among the 8 great manors, the 7th great manors had come. What kind of honor and face was this? Without a doubt, after today, the Qian clan would truly become the #1 clan under the 8 great manors. However, when Qianlong's gaze landed on the bridegroom and saw that the young man who should have been high-spirited and proud was weak and pale, the smile on Qianlong's face subconsciously faded and a trace of coldness and haze appeared in her eyes. "I didn't expect so many kings to come. The Qian clan is indeed powerful. We can't afford to offend them. After the marriage alliance between the Qian clan and our Li clan, it will definitely bring great benefits to our Li clan." In the Li family's procession, Li Yu's eyes trembled. Her eyes were filled with joy as she looked at the Qian family. At this moment, there were many people from the Wang family. She was imagining a beautiful future. The Wolf Fang Escort Agency congratulates the Qian and Li families on their joyous occasion. Outside the Qian clan, a few figures slowly walked over and appeared behind the Li family's procession. Not many people paid attention to the Wolf Fang Escort Agency. Many people in the imperial capital knew about the Wolf Fang Escort Agency. It was considered a powerful escort agency. However, compared to the Qian clan and Li clan's guests, the Wolf Fang Escort Agency didn't seem to hold much weight. The people from the Wolf Fang Escort Agency congratulated loudly, but they didn't attract much attention. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the bride. At this moment, who would pay attention to the Wolf Fang Escort Agency? However, in the Li clan, Liu was the first to notice. When the words Wolf Fang Escort Agency rang out, she immediately looked over. At this moment, behind the Li family's procession, 4 figures slowly walked out. The leader of the 4 was a burly man with a scar on his face. Following behind him was a young man who seemed to be carrying a broadsword on his back. There was also a big gold and cute little monkey on his shoulder. Its appearance was extremely strange. There were also 2 beautiful women, one big and one small. Any one of them was enough to cause a man to feel uneasy. Behind the 4 people, there was a small black cat following closely behind. It was very strange. Looking at the 4 people, Liu was stunned for a moment. Then, his originally joyous eyes were filled with joy. His figure passed through the crowd without leaving a trace, and then he arrived beside the head of the Wolf Fang Escort Agency, Dark Wolf. Liu was dressed in a festive manner. His gaze swept across the 2 beautiful women, and a trace of greed flashed across his eyes. He lowered his voice and said to Dark Wolf, "Dark Wolf, why did you send them here? Also, I only want the 2 women. I'll leave the man to you. But you did well. When the time comes, I'll definitely help persuade the Li family's trading company to cooperate with your Wolf Fang Escort Agency." Other than being dissatisfied with Dark Wolf for sending them to this joyous occasion, Liu was very satisfied with everything else. At this moment, Liu did not think of any possibility at all. In his heart and eyes, these 2 women were already being held hostage by the Dark Wolf. Tonight they would become his exclusive property. How many beauties could there be in the entire imperial capital? And he had already obtained 2 of them. As for the purple-robed young man, he could easily deal with him without anyone noticing. This was the capital. Even if these people were from Tianwu Academy, if they disappeared without a trace, how would Tianwu Academy know? Dark Wolf glanced at Liu and didn't say a word. Instead, he turned his gaze to Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu didn't say a word. He didn't even look at Liu. Instead, he raised his head slightly and looked to the front. In front of him, there were a few extraordinary young men and women walking over. "I knew you would come. I didn't expect you to really come to the capital. You didn't even look for us. Could it be that our relationship is so shallow? You didn't look for us even after coming to the capital. That's not nice of you. The few young men and women walked over and stood in front of Du Xiaofu. The aura from any one of them easily suppressed Liu, causing his body to tremble violently. The profound energy in his body stagnated, and he couldn't help but tremble. He had no choice but to stand by the side. The few young men and women didn't even look at Liu from the corner of their eyes. At this moment, Liu finally felt that something was amiss. Even though the few young men and women weren't as old as him, he recognized them. The general of the general manor, Gu Manners Gu Manor, Gu Manners Gu Xinyan, Ghost King Manners Gui Hua, Wu King Manners Wu Kei, and Wei King Manners Gui Xiaofeng. Other than their status, they were the most outstanding figures of the younger generation in the entire empire. It was rumored that they were among the top 5 in Tianwu Academy's martial ranking, and their names shook the entire capital. The status of the Li family's third young master was extraordinary in the entire imperial capital. Not many young people could compare to him. However, at this moment, the status of any one of these 5 young men and women was as different as heaven and earth compared to his status. It was enough to completely crush his status. They were existences that the Li family's third young master could only look at but not reach. However, right now, the 5 most outstanding youths in the capital didn't show any arrogance in front of the purple-robed young man, whom he didn't even place in his eyes yesterday. It was as if they were extremely familiar with each other, and it was obvious that their relationship wasn't shallow. At this moment, Liu felt as if someone had suddenly hammered his heart. His face gradually turned pale. At this moment, following the actions of the 5 extraordinary individuals from the 5 king palaces, the countless number of guests immediately turned their gazes over. How could a person who could cause the younger generation of the 5 great king palaces to simultaneously move to greet him be a simple person? In an instant, countless gazes from the surroundings curiously landed on the 4 people who had just arrived. At this moment, several gazes from the crowd were filled with astonishment. It was as if they had suddenly discovered something extremely terrifying. Du Xiaofu looked at the 5 familiar youths in front of him and smiled faintly. "Can I see you guys now? Who exactly is that fellow? What's going on?" As Du Xiaofu spoke, Liu's entire body started to tremble. How did this look like someone who was being held hostage? His face started to turn paler and paler as he started to tremble. For some reason, his heart started to feel uneasy and he started to tremble. He looked towards the dark wolf, but unfortunately, the dark wolf completely ignored him. "That's Du Xiaofu, the Du Xiaofu who swept through the Du household yesterday. That purple-robed young man is Du Xiaofu. Why is he here? Is he Du Xiaofu? I heard that Du Xiaofu is ranked first on the Tianwu Academy's martial ranking and has even refined a Dao artifact that can attract lightning tribulations. What a terrifying dual cultivator of the talisman Dao and martial Dao. He has outstanding talent." Someone in the crowd immediately recognized Du Xiaofu's identity. Many people had personally witnessed the scene of Du Xiaofu wreaking havoc in the Du household yesterday. The appearance of this ferocious young man in the Qian residence immediately caused a huge commotion. In the crowd, the bride, who was surrounded by many delicate women like stars around the moon, trembled slightly when she heard the sudden explosion of discussion around her. The groom, Chan Guyu, also looked to the front and saw the familiar purple-robed figure. He trembled slightly. "Du Xiaofu, how dare you come to my Qian residence today? Do you think that there's no one in my Qian residence who can stop you? I swear to the heavens that no matter who you are, I will not let you off." At this moment, a sharp and cold yell rang out from the crowd. Chapter 432. Qi! Just as he finished speaking, a figure shot out from the crowd like lightning. At the same time, a dazzling rune energy wave flashed out, and a palm print suddenly fell, directly passing through the crowd and suppressing Du Xiaofu. The terrifying energy wave caused the space to vibrate and boil like a vast ocean. The aura of a martial lord at the Nirvana realm erupted. In the entire imperial capital, he was considered an absolute expert. This sudden turn of events caused all the gazes in the surroundings to tremble. Du Xiaofu raised his head slightly, and his gaze moved slightly. With a raise of his hand, a fist print swept out, and a golden light burst out, directly colliding with the palm print that was suppressing towards him. Bang! A low and dull sound exploded, and the space trembled, and a huge wave of air swept out. Thump thump! A figure staggered and fell to the ground, only stabilizing his body after a few steps. Shock surged in his eyes. The person who had just attacked was the head of the Qian family, Wan Qian. So strong! Dark Wolf's eyes were filled with shock. Only now did he know that the person beside him was actually Du Xiaofu, who had caused a ruckus in the Du household yesterday. Although Dark Wolf had heard of such a shocking matter yesterday, he did not see it with his own eyes. If he had known that the person Liu had asked him to deal with yesterday was Du Xiaofu, who had caused a ruckus in the Du household, he would probably have directly kicked Liu out of the house. It's Qian Guyu's father, Wan Qian, the head of the Qian family. Yangshuang spoke softly beside Du Xiaofu. Her long and slender legs and curvaceous figure outlined a devilish and seductive arc. Her beautiful face was so alluring that it could steal one's soul, causing many young men in the surroundings to involuntarily be unwilling to shift their gazes away, wanting to take a few more glances. Today is a joyous day for the Qian family and the Li family. I'm here to congratulate you. Why do you have to fight? Du Xiaofu slightly raised his head and looked at the 10,000 million sea snakes. They looked somewhat similar to Qian Guyu and gave off an extraordinary aura. However, their eyes were extremely cold. Du Xiaofu had already expected that the Qian family would not welcome his appearance. Therefore, Du Xiaofu understood that he did not hurt anyone. If he was bullied, then his drunkard father would not be polite. Du Xiaofu was not afraid of the Qian family, so he did not want to hurt them. Whoosh whoosh! Just as Du Xiaofu had expected, after the tens of thousands of phantoms were forced back, the Qian family's fierce aura spread out, and a large number of phantoms suddenly rushed out, as if they were facing a great enemy. Their auras were tightly locked onto Du Xiaofu. Outside the Qian family, the festive atmosphere suddenly became heavy and tense. In the crowd, the white-clothed and black-haired young man from the Du family looked through the crowd and saw the purple-robed young man. His eyes flickered. The middle-aged man from Prince Xie's mansion also looked curiously at the purple-robed young man, who had a broadsword on his back and a golden macaque squatting on his shoulder. In the Li family's wedding procession, many people looked at the purple-robed young man curiously. Since you're here to congratulate us, then you're an honored guest of the Qian family. Qian Guyu broke the tense atmosphere. He walked up to Du Xiaofu and said, I didn't expect you to come. Many people looked at him with complicated expressions. Qian Guyu's eyes were black and white, but they had lost their usual vigor. I didn't expect you to come. I didn't expect you to come either. Du Xiaofu looked at Qian Guyu. He didn't expect to meet Qian Guyu again under such circumstances. My life was ruined by your hands, and you still dare to come today? Do you think my Li family can't do anything to you, or do you want to humiliate me again? As he looked at Du Xiaofu, Qian Guyu's eyes, which had lost their usual luster, began to ripple violently. Half a year had passed, and Du Xiaofu had gone from being a heaven's pride to being a cripple. This was difficult for him to accept, and it was likely that no one would be able to accept. You brought this upon yourself. Today, I came to the Qian family to take a look, that's all, Du Xiaofu said. You're right. I only have myself to blame for all of this. In the past half a year or so, I've thought about a lot of things. I've also thought about ending my life, but I'm unwilling to do so. Perhaps I don't have the courage to do so. Qian Guyu looked at Du Xiaofu as the intense emotions in his eyes subsided. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said softly, Just like how I looked down on you before, I thought you weren't qualified to compare to me. Later, I found out that it was just wishful thinking on my part, just like how I treated Li Shui. Du Xiaofu didn't say anything. Ouyang Shuang didn't say anything. The general, Gu Xinyan, and Wu Xiaofeng didn't say anything either. They just stood to the side and listened to Qian Guyu. It's not bad to be able to see all of you again. since you're here, since we're classmates, you can bear witness to this. Qian Guyu looked at Du Xiaofu, then at Ouyang Xuang, then at the general, Gu Xinyan, Gua Xiaofeng, Gui Hua, and the others. In the end, he turned around and walked back to the woman in the bridal gown. Whoosh! Qian Guyu fell silent for a while before taking a deep breath and saying, I've waited for this day for many years, and I've even looked forward to seeing you in your phoenix coronet and robes. I wonder what you'll look like. Today, seeing you in your phoenix coronet and robes can be considered as fulfilling my wish. However, today is not the right time. I like you, but I don't want to wrong you. For the sake of the Li family, I'm afraid that you must have suffered in the past half a year. Hearing Qian Guyu's words, Qian Guyu's body trembled slightly, and she raised her head slightly. It was impossible to see her expression, but it was most likely that she was moved by Qian Guyu's words. Everyone, thank you for coming to the Qian family today. On behalf of the Qian family, I, Qian Guyu, thank you all for coming. Qian Guyu raised his head and looked around as he said loudly. Secondly, as many people have said, my Qian Guyu Shinkei has been destroyed, and from now on, I've become a cripple. Qian Guyu has really become a cripple. The news isn't fake. It seems like everything is true. There's no smoke without fire. As soon as Qian Guyu finished speaking, the guests outside the Qian family were in an uproar. Qian Guyu had personally confirmed that the young master of the Qian family, Qian Guyu, had really become a cripple. This news was like a bomb to the guests. Everyone in the Qian family looked at Qian Guyu, then at Du Xiaofu. Their gazes were filled with coldness, anger, and coldness. What is he trying to do? Wu Kei said softly, her alluring figure leaning against Ghost Child's side. Finally, I want to announce. Qian Guyu looked at the uproar in the crowd and continued. My wedding with Li Shui is cancelled today. The Qian family and the Li family have cancelled the engagement. Once again, thank you all for coming today. As soon as he finished speaking, Qian Guyu bowed deeply to the crowd. The wedding is cancelled? The engagement is cancelled? What's going on? As soon as Qian Guyu finished speaking, the crowd went into an uproar. Everyone was shocked. Everyone from the Li clan who was sending off the bride had complicated expressions on their faces. This scene was completely out of everyone's expectations. What are you doing? Qian Guyu's expression changed drastically as he shouted at Qian Guyu. Father, forget it. This matter ends here. It has nothing to do with the Li family or Li Shui. Let me make the decision. Qian Guyu looked at his father and bowed deeply. I will not be able to revitalize the family in the future. I have let you down. Please forgive me. The joyous Qian family was completely silent at this moment. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Qian Guyu. No one had expected such an unforeseen event to take place at the wedding that was supposed to shock the entire capital. This guy has some redeeming qualities. If his cultivation wasn't destroyed, he would definitely have a place on the path of cultivation in the future. The general sighed. He didn't have much contact with Qian Guyu, but it seemed like Qian Guyu had some redeeming qualities. Du Xiaofu's eyes moved, but he didn't say anything. However, there were some ripples in his clear eyes. TSK. The red curtain was lifted, revealing Li Shui's beautiful face. Today, she was wearing a phoenix coronet and a robe. Her beauty was indescribable. What a beautiful bride! She's even on Tianwu Academy's martial ranking. She's extremely talented. Someone in the crowd sighed. Such a beautiful bride, who was on Tianwu Academy's martial ranking, was actually rejected by Qian Guyu. Li Shui's eyes trembled as she looked at Qian Guyu. Her lips parted slightly as she asked, Why? Because I'm not worthy of you. I don't want to see you suffer. Remember, you don't owe me anything. You tried to persuade me back then, but I didn't listen. It's enough for me to see you in a phoenix coronet before me. Qian Guyu looked at Li Shui and said, I've imagined you in a phoenix coronet many times, but you're even more beautiful than I imagined. Li Shui's eyes trembled as she looked at the man before her. Chapter 433. All right, I'll let you make the decision as long as you're happy. Looking at Chang Guyu and Li Shui, pain flashed through Qian Qian's eyes, and he nodded. He then looked at the leader of the Li family's entourage and said, Today, the Qian family and the Li family annulled the engagement, and the wedding is cancelled. From now on, the Qian family and the Li family are not enemies, but they are definitely not friends either. Forget it. The tall and skinny man murmured. The Li family's entourage had complicated expressions. The crowd was in an uproar. Many people sighed. The wedding between the Qian and Li clans had been cancelled. It wasn't hard to understand from Wan Wan's words that although the Qian and Li clans hadn't broken off, they were no longer allies. This would undoubtedly cause a lot of waves in the capital. Thank you, Father. Chang Guyu looked at Wan Qian gratefully. He knew that it wasn't easy for his father to make such a decision. What's more, this time, the entire empire's nobility had gathered. If the wedding ended up being cancelled, it would be disadvantageous for the entire Qian family. As long as you're happy, I'm willing to do anything. Remember, even if you can't cultivate, as long as the Qian family is here, you'll still be the young master of the Qian family. Wan Qian looked at Qian Guyu, his dignified eyes filled with gentleness, then he turned to look at the young man in purple. His face gradually became gloomy, and his aura began to surge. He said in a deep voice, However, there are some things that I must do. Those who hurt you, I absolutely cannot let go of them. Father. Qian Guyu shook his head, and before he could finish his sentence, Qian Guyu disappeared and said, Distinguished guests, the Qian clan's reception today has been poor, please forgive us. The wedding is cancelled, and we'll apologize to you another day. The Qian clan still has things to do today, and we don't want to be affected. Please leave. Millions of voices mixed with profound energy resounded in the sky and spread out. When the countless guests below heard this, they immediately looked at each other in dismay and then retreated one after another. The Qian family seems to want to deal with Du Xiaofu. We don't want to be affected. Among the crowd, there were some people with extraordinary foresight who saw the clues and immediately began to retreat. They were afraid that Wan Wan wanted to deal with Du Xiaofu at this time. How could the Qian family endure facing the culprit who crippled their son? Qian family disciples, prepared to set up the formation. In the air, the eyes of the 10 million spiritual beasts were sharp and gloomy as they looked down at Du Xiaofu, a cold light flashing in their eyes. Whoosh whoosh. Thousands of figures suddenly surged out from inside and outside the Qian clan after Wan Wan's words sounded. Over 100 figures soared into the sky, and all of their auras were at the pulsed spirit stage. The auras of several old men were obviously at the martial marquee realm. Waves of terrifying auras spread out and enveloped Du Xiaofu. Boom! Suddenly, the wind and clouds surged in midair. Waves of aura rippled, and runes could be faintly seen flashing about. It had the power to suppress the sky. The profound chi in the bodies of the weaker cultivators instantly stagnated under the sudden release of this aura, and their bodies trembled from the pressure. Judging from the strength displayed by the Qian family, it was not without reason that the Qian family was one of the top families in the capital. Such strength was not something that any family could produce. Do it. Kill them and it'll be fine. In a corner of the Li family, Li Yu had already secretly hid in the crowd. Through the crowd, he looked at the purple-robed youth and narrowed his eyes. Outside the Qian family, a great battle was about to break out. The atmosphere was tense and everyone retreated, afraid that they would suffer an unexpected calamity. However, there were some people who did not retreat and did not move at all. The general, Gu Xinyan, Gui Xiaofeng, Gui Hua, and Wu Kei stood by Du Xiaofu's side the entire time. They watched the Qian family as they drew their swords. Their expressions didn't change much. Everyone, there are matters between the Qian family and Du Xiaofu that need to be settled. Please move. 10 million ghouls floated in the air as the aura of the runes around them drifted out. They looked at the general, Gui Hua, and the other 4 who did not move. Patriarch Qian, let's just forget about this matter. Wu Xiaofeng sighed. He knew very well that if the Qian family really did take action against Du Xiaofu, the Qian family would probably send out all of their forces. The final result could be imagined. Not to mention that Du Xiaofu's strength was not something the Qian family could do anything to. There was also the terrifying Du Xiaoqing. Even 10 Qian families would not be enough to slap that terrifying girl. Du Xiaofu is our friend. If he encounters any trouble in the capital, then blame us for not being a good host. Patriarch Qian, let's end this matter here. General opened his mouth and looked at the 10 million ghouls. His aura that could suppress mountains and rivers made the 10 million ghouls in the air feel uneasy. The people from the 5 great princes' palaces are all standing beside Du Xiaofu. It seems like the people from the 5 great princes' palaces are not here for the Qian family, but for Du Xiaofu. As General and the others spoke, they retreated to a nearby guest area. Immediately, there were discussions among the guests. Looking at the situation, the relationship between the people from the 5 great princes' palaces and Du Xiaofu was much stronger than the Qian family. However, at this moment, not many people could tell that the general, Gui Xiaofeng, and the others were standing beside Du Xiaofu on the surface. In fact, it was the same as well. However, the general, Gui Xiaofeng, and the others' actions could be considered as giving the Qian family a way out. They wanted to secretly prevent the Qian family from finding trouble with Du Xiaofu for the sake of Qianguyu. They were very clear that if the Qian family were to take action, the consequences would definitely be unimaginable. Wan Qian's expression changed as he hovered in the air. At this moment, he naturally understood that the main reason why the people from the 5 great king palaces came to the Qian clan was not because of the Qian clan, but because of Du Xiaofu. Yesterday, Du Xiaofu caused havoc in the Du residence, and swept away the experts of the Du residence. As the head of the Qian family, how could Qian not know? However, after all, he did not see it with his own eyes. Moreover, at this moment, the enemy of his exiled son was right in front of him, and they could not live under the same sky. Qian was enraged. How could he let it go so easily? It was precisely because he knew how terrifying Du Xiaofu was and what happened to the Du residents yesterday that he set up a formation to deal with him from the beginning. Head of the Qian family, this matter is settled. My Ouyang Palace and Du Xiaofu have some relations. If the Qian family really wants to do something, my Ouyang Palace will definitely not stand by and watch. Amidst the crowd, an extraordinarily handsome and dignified middle-aged man that seemed to be in his 40s walked out. Every single move he made revealed a noble aura, and the few burly men and young men by his side all possessed extraordinary bearings and extraordinary auras. It's the second master of the Ouyang Palace, Ouyang Qiu, who was the first to arrive. Ouyang Palace is also related to Du Xiaofu. Looking at the dignified middle-aged man, some people in the crowd were discussing and were quite surprised. Ouyang Qiu's meaning was very clear. There was toughness in his politeness. If they dared to touch Du Xiaofu today, the Ouyang Palace would also take action against the Qian family. Ouyang Qiu walked out, and under the gaze of many people, he slowly walked to Du Xiaofu's side. Greetings, second uncle. Ouyang Shuang bowed with a smile. Yesterday, she left for a period of time and went home. Girl, you ran home yesterday to inform me and then ran away again. The old master was a little angry and asked me to bring you back today no matter what. Ouyang Qiu smiled and stared at his niece who had grown up. Then, he looked at Du Xiaofu and said, Good boy, you are indeed the son of brother Tingxian. Like father, like son. At this moment, Du Xiaofu was in a daze and looked at Ouyang Shuang. Listening to the words of Ouyang Qiu, the tomboy seemed to be a member of the Ouyang Palace. This Ouyang Qiu seemed to know his drunkard father. Looking at Du Xiaofu, who was in a daze, Ouyang Shuang blinked her big beautiful eyes and said with a little embarrassment, This is my second uncle. I have also met Uncle Tingxian before. There are 8 imperial palaces in the imperial capital. My grandfather is the Jinnan Wang. However, I have always lived with my parents in Longling City, so not many people in the imperial capital know of my existence. Phew, Du Xiaofu took a deep breath. Yesterday, the tomboy said that she was going to make some arrangements. She probably went back to the Ouyang Palace. That was why the people of the Ouyang Palace appeared in the Qian clan today. Then, Du Xiaofu looked at Ouyang Qiu. This person was Ouyang Shuang's second uncle, and he also knew his drunkard father. He bowed slightly and said, "Greetings, second uncle." "You are welcome." Ouyang Qiu smiled. His actions were extraordinary. In the air, thousands of eyes twitched. They did not expect that the Ouyang Palace would come for Du Xiaofu. Their relationship with Du Xiaofu was obviously different. Ouyang Qiu had even made it clear that if the Qian clan attacked Du Xiaofu, the Ouyang Palace would also intervene. The Qian clan was not enough to contend against the Ouyang Palace. Originally, I wanted to congratulate the Qian clan and the Li clan. However, I did not expect that the outcome would be so regretful. I have come at the wrong time. Please forgive me. However, let's forget about today's matter. Du Xiaofu and my Xie clan have some relationship. If the head of the Qian clan wants to attack, my Xie clan will not stand by and do nothing. Gee, following a delicate voice, the cry of a demonic beast resounded. A large white condor that was as white as snow and emitted an icy aura appeared in the sky, accompanied by a gust of cold air as it flapped its wings. A lady wearing a light blue dress stood on the large white condor. Her waist was slim, and her skin was smooth. She did not wear any makeup and her red lips were not red. A few strands of hair casually fluttered around her waist. She was elegant and charming. Behind the large white condor, there were a few flying demonic beasts. Behind them, there was a figure with a vigorous and sharp aura. As the aura spread, it was accompanied by an icy aura, causing the temperature of the entire space to plummet. I want to ask for more fresh flowers. However, when I think about how slow the update is, I am embarrassed to ask for more. Brothers, please take care of me and love me. Because I had a cold, I wrote slowly. Last night, my head was heavy and my feet were light. I slept from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. before I continued to write. It took me 8 hours to write these 3 chapters. I was embarrassed. Chapter 434. It's the Ice Demon Statue. That's Xiafei's mount. Xiafei's people are here. I didn't expect them to be related to Du Xiaofu. Xiafei is the flower of the entire Stone Dragon Empire. Countless princes, nobles, and talented young men are chasing after her. She has been in charge of many of Xia family's businesses. Her business is flourishing and it seems that she has already suppressed the other princes. Xiafei seems to be here for Du Xiaofu. Who is this Du Xiaofu? In midair, the girl slowly leaped down. Her figure was beautiful and graceful. She wore a light blue dress with a green veil covering her body. Her hair was casually tied up in a loose bun with a light purple flower in it. Her aura was like an orchid and she was extremely charming. After that, she landed beside Du Xiaofu and looked at Ouyang Qiu with her beautiful eyes. She smiled sweetly and said softly, "I didn't think that second master would also come. Girl, why are you here to join in the fun?" Ouyang Qiu looked at Xiafei as his eyes flickered. "Second master, my father and Du Xiaofu are old friends. He heard that Du Xiaofu has come to the imperial capital, so he asked me to bring him home." Xiafei's pearly white teeth parted slightly. Her eyes were smiling, revealing her cleverness. A few strands of hair casually fluttered around her waist, adding to her charm. Her eyes were sparkling, stirring people's hearts. Xiafei's father. Xiafei's words made many people's hearts tremble. The meaning behind her words was not simple. Everyone knew that the Xia family's old man was the dignified North Vanquishing King. The North Vanquishing King and Du Xiaofu were old friends. This simple sentence was enough to make people unable to guess. Du Xiaofu looked at the charming woman in front of him. He felt like he had seen her before, but he couldn't remember where. "What? Don't you recognize me?" Xiafei glanced at Ouyang Shuang and Du Xiaoqing and then looked at Du Xiaofu. "You are." Du Xiaofu was still puzzled. He couldn't remember where he had seen Xiafei before. Compared to Ouyang Shuang, this charming woman lacked some coldness and unapproachable beauty. However, her charm was something that Ouyang Shuang couldn't compare with. That kind of charm was natural and could stir one's heart. Suddenly, Du Xiaofu's eyes trembled as if he remembered something. He smiled and said, "It's you." Du Xiaofu finally remembered. This charming woman was the woman who had accompanied North vanquishing King in Dark Forest Town. However, her face was covered in freckles and her skin was rather withered and yellow. She looked extremely ugly. Now, it seemed that she had disguised herself and this was her true appearance. CFA smiled, she said. "Grandfather knows your king." Lin editor. "Okay, I'll pay him a visit." Du Xiaofu nodded. He owed North vanquishing King a favor and now that he sent someone here, he naturally had to pay him a visit. Du Xiaoqing looked at CFA with her innocent eyes and said, "What a beautiful sister." CFA smiled and looked at Du Xiaoqing. "You're beautiful too. You must be Du Xiaoqing." "That's right." Du Xiaoqing nodded, and her relationship with CFA became much closer. Hiya, rumble. The ground suddenly trembled, starting from the street. It was as if hundreds of beasts were galloping. Then, under everyone's gaze, many tall horses galloped over. Wherever their iron hooves passed, dust would fly, and the ground would tremble. There were hundreds of horses with yellow scales all over. They had 2 horns on their heads. They were agile and had a ferocious aura. Yellow striped dragon horses. They are the royal guard's mounts. The royal family is here. When they saw that the horses were the yellow striped dragon horses, everyone was shocked. Those were the royal guard's mounts. If the royal guards were here, it meant that the royal family was here. "The second princess is here!" A loud shout reverberated in the air. Hundreds of royal guards stood in a neat row. They were all wearing yellow armor and had long swords on their waists. Their aura was so powerful that it made the air tremble. A delicate and pretty girl immediately jumped down from the yellow-striped flood dragon horse that had the most extraordinary aura. She had 2 short braids, and under her slender eyelashes, her eyes were sparkling like black gems. "Greetings, second princess." Seeing the girl jump down from the yellow-striped dragon horse, the surrounding people all bowed respectfully. The onlookers in the distance all knelt down on the ground. The experts from the Qian clan and the Qian clan who were floating in the air had no choice but to kneel down on one knee. No one dared to not bow. The royal family was above the 8 great imperial mansions. They controlled the empire. The second princess was a noble person. Even the general, Hu Xiaofeng, Gu Xinyan and the others bowed slightly. Only Ouyangqiu, Du Xiaofu, Du Xiaoqing, Du Xiaoyao and the little tiger didn't bow. "Everyone please rise." The girl with braids got down from the horse and went to Wu Quebec. She said, "Cousin, why didn't you come to the palace to play with me? I just came back from the college. I was planning to go to the palace to visit my uncle." Wu Kei said. She wasn't just a princess of the netherworld. She was a princess of the Stone Dragon Empire. Her mother was the sister of the current king of the Stone Dragon Empire. "Greetings, senior brothers and sisters." The girl nodded to the general, Gu Xinyan and the others. She didn't put on the airs of a princess at all. Finally, she went to Du Xiaofu. Her face was delicate and beautiful. Under her long eyelashes, her big eyes were sparkling like black gems. She looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "We meet again. I went to the inn where you stayed but couldn't find you, so I came here. Luckily, I finally found you." "Why are you looking for me?" asked Du Xiaofu. He naturally knew this girl. Her name was Qingyan. She was an influential person among the new students of Tianwu Academy. They had fought against each other when they first entered Tianwu Academy. Later, he found out that she was the second princess of the Stone Dragon Empire. "My imperial father asked me to summon you to the palace, but I don't know why," Qingyan said. She just got the order from her elder sister in the morning. She didn't know what her father wanted to do with Du Xiaofu. But thinking that it was to find Du Xiaofu, she didn't know why she immediately went out of the palace to look for him, with some inexplicable little expectations in her heart. Du Xiaofu frowned. He didn't know why the king of the Stone Dragon Empire wanted to see him. Du Xiaofu didn't know if he should go or not. Ouyang Shuang, who was beside Du Xiaofu, secretly nodded her head in acknowledgement. Since the Emperor of the Empire had summoned her, she had to go. All right, but I have to go to Prince Xie's mansion to visit the North Vanquishing Prince first. Can I go to the palace later? Du Xiaofu nodded to Qing Yan after seeing Ouyang Shuang's nod. As soon as Du Xiaofu's voice fell, many people around him were surprised. The Emperor of the Empire had summoned him, but this guy didn't take it seriously and even wanted to visit North Vanquishing Prince first. They didn't know if he really didn't know the rules or if he was really bold. CFA's beautiful face revealed a wry smile. Going to see the North Vanquishing Prince first, and then the king. This was clearly making the imperial family think too much. Many of the imperial guards had ugly expressions when they heard Du Xiaofu's words. However, since the second princess didn't say anything, they didn't dare to interrupt. All right, then you can go later. This is my token. You can find me at any time and I'll take you to see my imperial father. Qing Yan nodded. She handed over a token with dragon and tiger stripes to Du Xiaofu and turned around to jump on her yellow flood horse. I'll wait for you in the palace. Don't go too late. Otherwise, my imperial father will blame me. Chen Yan left with the imperial guards after she finished speaking. They came quickly and left quickly. However, as Qing Yan left, everyone's gazes turned to Du Xiaofu again. Their gazes had become extremely complicated. No one would have thought that Du Xiaofu was actually related to the imperial family. Within the crowd, the hair of Dui from the Du clan fluttered slightly as he looked at the purple-robed young man, who was surrounded by many Wengfu. Just now, the royal family had also come to summon him. Within his eyes, a cold glint gradually gushed out. Qian and the other members of the Qian family had ugly expressions on their faces. Du Xiaofu was protected by the various princes, and was summoned by the imperial family. If the Qian family were to take action now, they would be rebelling against the imperial family. Even if there were 10 Qian families, they wouldn't be able to contend against them. However, they were unwilling to let Du Xiaofu leave. Some of the older members of the Qian family were even worried. If Du Xiaofu wanted to deal with the Qian family, it would be easy for him to remove the Qian family from the imperial capital. Du Xiaofu looked at the members of the Qian family and Qian. He didn't say anything and turned to CFA. Please take me to visit the Northern Vanquishing Prince. All right. CFA nodded and smiled. Her smile was charming and captivating. Since the matter between the Qian family and the Li family had been settled, this was the best outcome. There was no need for him to stay any longer. Du Xiaofu turned around and prepared to leave. Right at this moment, an indifferent voice sounded. Hiding behind the backs of women and the various princes, is this all you've got? The so-called talent of being ranked first in Tianwu Academy's martial ranking is just an undeserved reputation. I'm a hard-working bee. I'll continue to write another chapter and make up the 8 chapters from yesterday. 8 chapters will sound better. Also, I beg for fresh flowers. Chapter 435. Following this indifferent voice, many gazes immediately turned towards the source of the voice. Their gazes fell upon the black-haired youth in white. Is he going to interfere? The general, Gu Xinyan, Gui Hua, Wu Kei, Gui Xiaofeng and the others were all moved. Du Xiaofu had just turned around when he heard the voice. His gaze fell upon the black-haired youth in white. He looked to be around 23 or 24 years old. His hair and clothes fluttered in the wind. His tall and slender figure gave him an extraordinary aura. He is Dui from the Du household, the nephew of the king. He is ranked second in the younger generation of the Du family. He has always been hidden by the Du family and rarely shows himself. It is rumored that his talent is extremely terrifying. He was personally trained by the elders of the Du household since he was young. He is the pinnacle existence of the younger generation of the empire. He broke through to the martial lord realm at the age of 18 and once shook the entire empire. He is also the nephew of the head of the Qian family, Wan Qian. CFA's voice fell softly beside Du Xiaofu's ear. Her voice was like a lark and her aura was like an orchid. Her voice made Du Xiaofu feel numb. Du Xiaofu looked at Dui, his eyebrows twitching. Yesterday, among the numerous figures behind the king of the Dew household, within the multicolored light, there seemed to be the figure of this youth. Brother, I'll go take care of him. Seeing that someone was bullying her brother, Du Xiuqing's face was instantly filled with anger. She pouted her tender red lips and was about to attack. Little Qing, forget it. Let's go. Du Xiaofu pulled Du Xiaoqing back, his gaze sighing slightly. He then said to Xie Fei beside him, Let's go. Xie Fei heard this and was rather surprised. However, her gaze did not show it. She waved her hand and the ice demon condor in the air flapped its wings. She opened her red lips slightly and opened her pearly white teeth. She said softly to Du Xiaofu, Ride my ice demon condor. It'll be faster. You don't even dare to make a move. You'd be better off dealing with some random cats and dogs. As expected, you only know how to hide behind a woman. Seeing that Du Xiaofu had no intention of paying attention to him, Du Yi's face darkened slightly. His eyes were cold, and an invisible wave of air rippled out. The surrounding space seemed to solidify. You should go back first. I'll pay a visit to North Vanquishing Prince first, and then I'll go find you. Du Xiaofu still did not pay attention to Du Yi. Firstly, today's matter had already come to an end, and secondly, he did not want to have too much involvement with the people of the Dew household. After yesterday's matter, he did not have any expectations for the Dew household, and even did not have any good impressions of them. After speaking softly to Ouyang Shuang beside him, profound qi gushed out from the soles of his feet, and he immediately leapt up, his figure flying straight towards the frigid ice demon sculpture in midair. Humph! Without her brother's permission to make a move, Du Xiaoqing could only snort. Her beautiful figure was immediately pulled up onto the frigid ice demon sculpture by Du Xiaofu, and the little tiger's figure also leapt into the air. This Du Xiaofu's temper is really good, to be able to endure such ridicule. I think he doesn't live up to his reputation. Facing the Du family's Du Yi, he doesn't dare to make a move. The Du family's Du Yi is an 18-year-old martial lord, and he didn't even bother to enter Tianwu Academy. 6 years should have passed by now, and with his talent, who knows how terrifying he has become. Although this Du Xiaofu is extraordinary, his reputation should be exaggerated. Right now, facing the Du family's Du Yi, he doesn't dare to make a move. That shouldn't be the case. Yesterday, Du Xiaofu swept through many experts in the Du household. I heard that the one who swept through the Du household yesterday was a little girl from the beast race. Her origins are mysterious, and it wasn't Du Xiaofu who did it. After seeing Du Xiaofu leave, there were quite a number of discussions in the surroundings. They had also started to doubt Du Xiaofu's strength according to the rumors. That fellow seems to have changed today. Ghost Child slightly raised his head and looked at Du Xiaofu, who was on the frigid ice demon sculpture, with doubt in his eyes. This is indeed unlike him. Hua Xiaofeng was also puzzled. This is him. Losing his patience after being ridiculed by others, that's not his character. The general crossed his arms in front of his chest, and a light flickered in his eyes as he said, I'm afraid that he doesn't even care about Du Yi. Let's go. Xie Fei's beautiful figure leaped onto the frigid ice demon sculpture, and her graceful figure drifted down, causing many people below to be in a daze. She looked at Du Xiaofu with a faint smile and gave a signal with her mind. The frigid ice demon sculpture let out a screech, flapped its wings, and soared into the sky. Ha ha ha, you really only know how to hide under the protection of women and others. What bullshit Tianwu Academy's martial rankings Earth rank? As expected of a descendant of the Stone City's declining branch family. You're just a figurehead. If it wasn't for first uncle sparing you on account of the Stone City's Du family, you would have long been killed in the Du household. Du Dingxuan's son is nothing more than that, a coward. Looking at the frigid ice demon sculpture leaving, Du Yi sneered. A faint luster flowed on his skin, and a lightning-like glow flickered in his eyes, causing others to tremble uncontrollably. Du Yi is too arrogant. Wu Kei's eyes darkened. As a member of the Tianwu Academy, Wu Kei felt extremely uncomfortable when Du Yi looked down on the Tianwu Academy. He has the qualifications to be arrogant. I feel that we won't be able to resist him, unless that fellow is on the same level as Chieshi. There's a reason why the Du household has existed for so many years. Gu Xinyan's beautiful eyes shone brightly. It seems that Du Xiaofu is just SOSO. His reputation is a little exaggerated. Seeing is believing. It seems that Du Xiaofu is just SOSO. Even though he's a little extraordinary, he's still far from being comparable to the Du household. Among the crowd, many sighed and discussed. The Du household was still the Du household, the number one household in the empire. Chi! Suddenly, just as everyone was discussing, a sharp sound of wind breaking resounded in the sky. Following which, a figure wrapped in golden light flashed across the sky like a bolt of golden lightning and landed on the ground. Boom! The golden figure landed on the ground, causing the ground to tremble violently. The golden light retracted and everyone saw a purple-robed youth with a mysterious broadsword on his back. It was Du Xiaofu, who had just left. Tianwu Academy isn't a place for you to make irresponsible remarks. The name Du Tingxian is not for you to say. As the purple-robed figure landed on the ground, a young and clear laughter resounded. The sound waves rumbled and spread in all directions, resounding across the horizon. Everyone was stunned when they saw Du Xiaofu return. The Qian family, Li family, Ouyang Manor, and the other families were visibly moved. That fellow finally couldn't hold himself back. Wu Kei smiled. Her alluring figure gently leaned on Ghost Child's body, causing many people to look at Ghost Child with envy. He's back. It's time for Dewey to suffer. On the general's imposing body, there was a faint bronze color to his skin. His facial features were distinct and deep. He smiled faintly and said, I really want to know how far he has progressed in the Tianwu Talisman realm in half a year. Gee! In the air, the frigid ice demonic condor returned. CFA, Du Xiaoqing, Du Xiaoyao, and the little tiger stood on the back of the frigid ice demonic condor. They looked down, and had no intention of jumping down. Looking at Du Xiaofu, who had suddenly returned, Du Yi and many members of the Du family were stunned. It seemed like they had not expected this. Humph! Looking at Du Xiaofu, a tall youth stood behind Du Yi with his hands behind his back. He was the influential figure among the freshmen of Tianwu Academy. Du Qi, his tall and straight figure made him look more handsome and noble. On his handsome face, there was a trace of coldness in his clear eyes. He said, Do you really think that a branch family member can contend against the main family? Why? Aren't you going to hide under the protection of a woman? Looking at Du Xiaofu, who had left and returned, Dewey took 2 steps forward. His eyes flickered with a cold glint. A trace of disdain flashed through his sneering eyes as he said, Since you want to prove Tianwu Academy and your father, Du Tingxian, I'll give you a chance. As long as you dare to fight with me once, regardless of the outcome, I'll let you leave. In fact, I could even allow your Stone City's Du family to return to the main family. Hearing Di's words, many gazes flickered and an uproar broke out. From his tone, they could tell that Du Xiaofu's background was related to the Du family. How about it? If you don't dare, then scram back to Stone City. In the future, you can rely on a woman to protect you for the rest of your life. But remember, don't use the surname Du in the future because you're not worthy. After looking around, Di's gaze once again stared fixedly at Du Xiaofu as he sneered in disdain, revealing a trace of ridicule. The general, Gu Xinyan, Wu Kei, Gui Hua, Gui Xiaofeng, and the others all looked at Du Xiaofu. They didn't like Di's arrogance, but they knew how powerful Dui was. Back then, Dui had left behind too many legends in the capital. The general, Gu Xinyan, Gui Hua, and the others were all prideful individuals, but before Dui, they couldn't help but feel some fear. Therefore, they all hoped that Du Xiaofu would fight with Dui. Whether it was for Tianwu Academy or for the displeasure in their hearts, it was fine as long as they could vent their anger. At this moment, the gazes of the entire audience were all focused on Du Xiaofu. Everyone wanted to know if that ferocious youth in the rumors would dare to fight in the face of Du Yi's provocation and provocation. Was his reputation exaggerated, or did he really have outstanding talent? Chapter 436. Phew! Du Xiaofu slowly exhaled. Du Yi's strength is extraordinary. He cultivates the lightning runes of the Du family. His attacks are domineering and destructive. Be careful. Not far away, the general looked at Du Xiaofu and knew that Du Xiaofu was about to make a move. Du Xiaofu turned around with a calm smile on his face. He smiled at the general and said, "Do you think that the people on the martial ranking would be weaker than the Du family?" When the general heard this, he was slightly taken aback. Then, a smile appeared on his chiseled face. He said to Du Xiaofu, "Don't be so courteous. Don't worry about it. I will accompany you on behalf of the general's residence. There's also the Gu residence." Gu Xinyan raised her eyes. Her nose was tall and straight, her red lips were moist and translucent, and her teeth were as white as pearls. Her beautiful eyes shone brightly. "Don't stand on ceremony. I'll accompany you on behalf of the Ghost King residence," Ghost Child said indifferently. On his handsome face, the radiance in his eyes was not to be underestimated. "There's also the Wu King residence." Wu Kei smiled. "Let some people know that the martial ranking of our Tianwu Academy is not bullshit. Don't worry about it. If anyone dares to do anything, the Gu residence will accompany them." Wu Xiaofeng's long black hair was tied behind his head. A few strands of hair fell to his ears. His deep, dark eyes were filled with displeasure. "I understand." Du Xiaofu gave a faint smile to the general and the others, then turned around, his body slowly taking a step forward. Raising his head, he calmly looked at Du Yi, opening his mouth to say, "Do you want to go up alone, or do you want to be like yesterday, the so-called Du household to go up together?" As Du Xiaofu's indifferent voice sounded out, the blood in the entire area instantly boiled for no reason. Everyone knew that under Du Yi's provocation and ridicule, Du Xiaofu was finally unable to endure it any longer and was about to make a move. Everyone once again began to retreat, not wanting to be implicated. Whether it was Du Xiaofu or the Du household, the onlookers knew that they could not offend them for no reason. It was good to watch the show, but they could not interfere, and even more so, they could not be implicated. As Du Xiaofu's indifferent words fell, the faces of the people from the Du household turned ugly. What happened yesterday was the biggest insult to the Du household. All the experts from the Du household were wiped out. Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu was undoubtedly Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu. Was the Du household. Of the Du on the ice demon sculpture, Xie Fei stood quietly as she looked below. A strand of hair by her ear fluttered in the wind, adding to her charm. Du Yi's cold and arrogant face instantly turned gloomy at this moment. His eyes glanced at the general and the other 4 people behind Du Xiaofu. A cold glint flashed across his handsome face as he said in a deep voice, "Don't think that you can contend against the main clan just because you have someone backing you. I alone am enough to deal with you." Du Xiaofu raised his head. At this moment, his clear eyes were filled with a domineering aura. A golden light blossomed in his eyes as he looked straight at Du Yi. He opened his mouth and said, "You are not qualified." "Ha ha." Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, Du Yi's cold smile was not angry, but instead, he laughed. However, at this moment, anyone could hear the coldness in his laughter that made one's heart tremble. Boom! As Du Yi's laughter subsided, waves of air rippled out from Du Yi's body. Light flickered on his skin and swept across the sky like a storm. The surrounding space trembled for no reason. Above the sky, layers of dark clouds gathered. Lightning flashed and thunder roared, causing people's hearts to tremble. Looking straight at Du Xiaofu, Du Yi's arrogant face revealed a cold smile. He arrogantly shouted, "Brat, you asked for it. Today, on behalf of the family, I will bring down the family law. Crawl!" Du Yi's body trembled as his cry sounded. The glow within his eyes was like a lightning glow. His body transformed into a lightning-like afterimage and appeared in the air in front of Du Xiaofu in a short instant. Thunder Fist! Everything happened as fast as lightning. Du Yi's figure swooped down. His hand seals changed. His 5 fingers clenched into fists. On his fists, lightning overflowed. Behind him, the wind and clouds surged. His fist was like a thunderball, ruthlessly sweeping down. The battle between the two was on the verge of breaking out. At this moment, everyone's eyes trembled. Dewey was too strong. His tyrannical strength exceeded many people's expectations. Sky-shaking wings! Dewey was very fast. However, at the same time his fist fell, Du Xiaofu also moved. He waved his hand and directly stretched out his right arm. On his hand seal, layers of mysterious golden talisman patterns overlapped. The tyrannical aura was like a volcanic eruption. Bang! Bang! The thunder fist shook the sky. Du Yi's entire body was overflowing with lightning. Du Xiaofu's golden light flashed and soared into the sky. One fist and one hand collided. A low muffled sound of energy suddenly exploded. Dazzling runes bloomed and waves of air soared into the sky. Chi-chi! A terrifying wind swept out and spread. Du Yi's figure was directly forced to retreat. His fist was numb, and his eyes trembled slightly. It seemed that everything was a little different from what he had imagined. Dang dang! Du Xiaofu took 2 steps back and stabilized his body. In the middle of his palm, there was a thunder rune flickering. Du Yi's attack could corrode everything. However, when the lightning energy struck his body, Du Xiaofu felt as though there was an indescribable mysterious energy within his body that was being affected. This mysterious energy directly swallowed and pulled away the lightning energy that was striking his body before it disappeared without a trace. He actually managed to resist it. As expected, he has some ability. His reputation is definitely not exaggerated. Looking at Du Yi's attack in the field, some of the martial lord realm cultivators were shocked. Du Yi's attack just now was probably something that even martial lords at the Nirvana realm could not resist. However, Du Xiaofu was able to resist it. It was enough to prove that Du Xiaofu was definitely worthy of his reputation. The so-called Du Royal Residence is nothing more than this. Du Xiaofu raised his head and looked at Du Yi, who was in midair. The corner of his mouth curled into a faint smile. Kid, don't be so arrogant. I was just testing your strength just now. Du Yi sneered arrogantly. He clenched his fist, and the runes around his body surged. Dark clouds gathered in midair behind him, and a mighty aura swept across the sky from his body. It channeled the energy of heaven and earth. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled as the air trembled. A terrifying aura spread across this part of the world, causing the celestial chi in the bodies of those below who were not strong enough to stop and freeze. Under the pressure of the aura of lightning and thunder, it made people's hair stand on end and their souls tremble. Martial Lord Realm at the peak of the Nirvana realm. Du Yi has already reached the peak of the Nirvana realm. Gosh, in 6 years' time, from the initial stage of the Martial Lord realm to the peak of the Martial Lord realm. What a terrifying breakthrough speed! A 24-year-old Martial Lord realm at the peak of the Nirvana realm. It is very likely that he will be able to step into the Martial King realm before the age of 30. This talent is too terrifying. As expected of the peak of the younger generation from the Du Royal Residence. Facing the terrifying aura that swept across this part of the world, countless gazes in the surroundings trembled. He is really strong! The general, Gu Xinyan, Gui Xiaofeng, and the others were all moved at this moment. Martial Lord Realm at the peak of the Nirvana realm. If they did not enter the heavenly martial talisman realm in the past 6 months in exchange for 5 years' time, they would probably not be able to compare with Du Yi. Even if they had an extra 4.5 years' time now, counting the time of cultivation, they were almost the same as Du Yi. However, in terms of cultivation level, there was still a gap between them. Kid, you must remember this. How can a branch family member compete with the main family? You think you are extraordinary just because you have some talent. Little do you know that in front of me, you are nothing. Looking at the countless shocked gazes in the surroundings, Du Yi laughed proudly. His talent was astonishing since he was young. He stepped into the Pulse Spirit realm at the age of 13 and the Martial Lord realm at the age of 18. His name shook the empire. Among his peers, other than his elder brother, no one could compare with him. Since he was young, he had followed the elders of the Du family to cultivate in seclusion. He cultivated diligently and comprehended so that he could one day step into the martial king realm before the age of 30. Recently, after he came out of seclusion, he heard that there was a Du Xiaofu who was said to be an outstanding talent. He practiced both talisman and martial arts and was ranked first on the martial ranking of Tianwu Academy. He had attracted a lightning tribulation by refining a Dao artifact. He was secretly evaluated by many people in the empire as the true number one person in the younger generation. From the elders of the Du family, Dui also found out that Du Xiaofu was from the branch family of the Stone City Du family. What qualifications did a member of a branch clan have to be mentioned in the same breath as the proud son of heaven of his main clan? 17 years ago, when Dui was 7 or 8 years old, he saw Du Xiaofu's father, Du Tingxian, with his own eyes. He brought a calamity to the Du family. In that calamity, the experts of the Du household were no match for him, and even his father was no match for him. Only Du Tingxian stood proudly in the sky. He was incomparably tyrannical as he swept through his enemies. That tyrannical figure was imprinted in Du Yi's heart. In the depths of Du Yi's heart, he secretly swore that one day he would surpass Du Tingxian. However, when Du Yi came out of seclusion full of confidence and planned to fight against the Tianhu Empire for the Stone Dragon Empire, he learned that Du Dingshuan's son had already become famous in the empire. Moreover, the elders of the clan wished to recruit him into the main family and nurture him. Du Yi couldn't accept this. He wanted to let the outside world know that Du Xiaofu's so-called outstanding talent was nothing in front of him. He wanted to let the few elders of the clan know that a branch family's son couldn't compete with him. That kid's talent isn't weak. He is a promising talent. It's just that his personality is lacking. I'm afraid his future will be limited. It's a pity. Jin Qingquan's voice suddenly sounded in Du Xiaofu's ears. Chapter 437. That kid's talent isn't weak and can be molded. It's just that his personality is lacking and his future is limited. What a pity! Jin Qingquan's voice suddenly sounded in Du Xiaofu's ears. Martial Lord Peak of the Nirvana realm? Du Xiaofu raised his head and looked at the sky. Under the pressure of the wind and clouds, his purple robe fluttered and his black hair moved slightly. His eyes gradually turned golden. Dewey laughed coldly. His figure stepped into the air as wind rose and clouds surged around him. This part of the sky suddenly became dusky. His aura was incomparably powerful, causing many ladies in the sky to fall in love with him at first sight, as they quietly relaxed. Chi! Dewey waved his hand and silver snake-like lightning appeared on his palm. Mysterious runes rippled and a lightning rune light beam condensed. Kid, it's time to let you know the difference between us. As his voice fell, Dee's eyes were filled with arrogance and coldness. The lightning light beam in his hand vibrated, and his figure pounced down, as if he had turned into a lightning python. With a thunderous roar, he suppressed Du Xiaofu. Wherever the lightning python passed, the space was distorted. Silver snakes flickered and wreaked havoc in the sky. The lightning python contained a destructive aura. Vast and domineering energy poured down like an ocean, wanting to suppress and drown Du Xiaofu. Dewey actually didn't hold back and wants to suppress Du Xiaofu in one move. Du Xiaofu is not ordinary, and is not easy to deal with. If Dewey wants to suppress Du Xiaofu, he can only go all out. At this moment, countless gazes trembled violently, and their hearts trembled with fear. At this moment, many people gasped for Du Xiaofu and were on tenterhooks. At this moment, facing Dewey from the Du household, the most powerful youth in the entire empire, could Du Xiaofu, who had walked out of Tianwu Academy, truly resist or lose miserably? Du Xiaofu raised his eyes and gazed at the beam of lightning that flashed down from the sky at lightning speed. Golden talisman markings could be faintly seen spreading within his golden eyes. Under the horrified gazes of everyone present, he had no intention of dodging at all. Golden profound energy enveloped his entire body, and he allowed the terrifying beam of lightning to directly strike down. Under the horrified gazes of the crowd, the lightning bolt in Du Yi's palm, which was like a lightning python, directly bombarded Du Xiaofu's chest like an impact cannon. Boom! Countless lightning runes editor, Chris editor, Chris editor, Chris editor, Chris Du Xiaofu's Chris Chris, Chris Chris. Chris Chris. Du. Boom! As the lightning beam from the palm fell, Du Xiaofu's body was suddenly surrounded by terrifying lightning runes. Lightning flashed and wreaked havoc all over his body, just like silver snakes sweeping across the sky. Under the terrifying impact force, Di's eyes revealed a cold sneer. His palm struck against Du Xiaofu's chest. Chi la la! Du Xiaofu's feet, one in front and one behind, was knocked back horizontally. His feet rubbed two deep cracks on the hard stone floor. The stone floor was overturned, broken stones were shot out, and a terrifying storm swept out along with lightning and thunder. Rumble! Rumbling sounds could be heard from the surrounding streets. Large numbers of magnificent buildings in the surroundings exploded one after another, erupting with boundless light energy. Lightning runes dyed the entire sky incomparably resplendent, and the ground trembled incessantly. What a terrifying Dewey! His cultivation at the peak of the Nirvana realm of the Martial Marquis realm is enough to make ordinary Martial Marquis realm complete cultivators not dare to fight head-on. I'm afraid Du Xiaofu is going to be suppressed and killed. The best outcome is that he will be on his last breath, as expected of the most powerful young generation from the Du household. He's so terrifying! Such a terrifying attack power made people's hearts tremble. Even Ouyang Qiu from the Ouyang household who was in the crowd was shocked at this moment. His eyebrows suddenly furrowed. You can't even withstand a single blow! Dewey sneered arrogantly. His palm was tightly pressed against Du Xiaofu's chest. He could feel that the vast lightning attack that he had activated poured into Du Xiaofu's body. Under the destructive power of the lightning, Du Xiaofu couldn't even withstand a single blow. He was afraid that his body would explode and die. A person from a branch family, with a reputation and some ability, but in the end, in front of him, he was nothing. Is it because you can't withstand a single blow, or is your attack useless against me? Suddenly, within the lightning talisman that was wrapped in the raging bright light, when Du Xiaofu's figure stomped on the ground for the last time, the ground shattered, the street cracked, and countless of bluestone floor shattered. Countless cracks spread continuously. Du Xiaofu stretched out his palm. A gush of golden xianqi surged out from the bright lightning. His entire body seemed to have monstrous talisman patterns that were about to burst out. These talisman patterns were different from the talisman patterns on the golden-winged giant rock's body. However, their aura was equally domineering. At this moment, Dewey seemed to have suddenly felt something. The expression in his cold and arrogant eyes changed. His palm moved away from Du Xiaofu, and his figure instantly retreated. In his mind and soul, a trembling chill climbed out from the depths of his soul. Roar! But at this moment, Dewey wanted to retreat, but he was already one step too late. In the raging lightning, Du Xiaofu let out a roar that sounded like a dragon's roar and a divine elephant's cry. Boom! At this moment, the ground rumbled, space trembled, and a domineering aura surged, peerless and disdainful of the world. In the midst of this shocking change, in the chaotic space, only those cultivators who had reached the peak level could vaguely see the talisman patterns blossoming in space. Cutting through the obstruction of space, Du Xiaofu's palm shot out from the raging lightning. It was like a bolt of lightning, and it landed on Du Yi's chest with a loud bang. Bang! On Du Yi's chest, the place of impact was like a thunderclap, and a series of dazzling talisman patterns burst forth. In the shocking sound, it was as if this space was about to shatter. A thunderous muffled sound of energy suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. In a split second, terrifying energy ripples suddenly swept out like a stormy sea. The domineering and terrifying aura overflowed the sky, easily suppressing everything. It caused one's scalp to go numb, their hair to stand on end, and their hair to stand on end. Everything happened extremely quickly. The energy storm that swept out like a storm also came to a sudden stop. Then, it quickly dispersed under the shocked gazes of the crowd. Gotcha! Before everyone could recover from their shock, they heard a low and deep muffled sound, mixed with the sound of bones breaking. Everyone's vision blurred, and then they saw Du Yi's figure flying away in front of Du Xiaofu like a kite with a broken string. In the end, he heavily crashed into a courtyard at the entrance of the Qian clan behind him. Rumble. Under the terrifying impact, Du Yi's body directly shattered and collapsed the entire courtyard with a rumble. Gravel shot out, and in an instant, it turned into a pile of ruins. The surrounding ground trembled, and cracks collapsed. This is impossible. How can this be? How can Du Yi be defeated? In the surroundings, Du Qi and the other experts of the Du family who followed Du Yi were dumbfounded at this moment. In the crowd, the people of the Qian clan were dumbfounded. The surrounding guests and the countless onlookers who were continuously gathering at this moment all sucked in a breath of cold air. This scene, to everyone, was not just a little bit shocked in their hearts. Who would have thought that Du Yi, the peak of the younger generation of the Du family who had stepped into the peak of the martial lord realm, would actually be so miserably defeated by Du Xiaofu? In the end, it was only 2 moves, and Du Yi was overbearingly defeated by Du Xiaofu in just 2 moves. It was as if he was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. He was unmatched. Who still dares to doubt Du Xiaofu? With his age and strength, in the entire empire, other than the talent of the Du family back then, I'm afraid that no one can go against him. In the crowd, the representatives of the various factions looked at each other, and there was a trace of shock in their eyes. The strength that Du Xiaofu had just displayed was enough to make anyone tremble. Compared to Du Yi, he is more ferocious and solid. This kid is indeed Big Brother Tingshuan's son. Looking at the scene just now, Ouyang Qiu nodded slightly, and he could not contain the shock in his eyes. On the back of the ice demon eagle, Xie Fei looked at the scene below, and a trace of shock flashed across her eyes. She muttered softly, "Grandfather's eyesight is really sharp." Buzz buzz. Lightning wreaked havoc, and Du Xiaofu stood straight, allowing the ferocious and terrifying lightning runes to drill into his body. Only Du Xiaofu himself knew that when the lightning energy that Du Yi had just unleashed landed on his body, it caused his internal organs to tremble. However, a mysterious force immediately surged within his body, and immediately swallowed and absorbed the lightning energy. That mysterious force was like a bottomless pit, and it completely absorbed the lightning energy before disappearing once again. The moment that mysterious force disappeared, Du Xiaofu clearly felt that some subtle changes seemed to have occurred within his body. However, they also disappeared without a trace. That feeling was untouchable and extremely ethereal. The reason why he had chosen to forcefully resist Du Yi's attack was because Du Xiaofu had discovered that the lightning energy had an effect on him during the first move. It was as though something within his body had awakened after he narrowly escaped from the lightning calamity. It had a special reaction to lightning energy, such as the ability to devour lightning energy. Thus, Du Xiaofu wanted to make use of this opportunity to see if he could find the mysterious force that seemed to be awakening within his body. Buzz buzz. When the last trace of lightning energy disappeared from Du Xiaofu's body, the purple-robed youth with a broadsword on his back appeared before everyone's shocked gazes. Du Yi couldn't even withstand a single blow. He truly lives up to his reputation as the #1 on Tianwu Academy's martial ranking. As they looked at Du Xiaofu's unscathed and carefree appearance under the destructive power of the lightning, the entire place was in an uproar. Can't even withstand a single blow. Du Xiaofu stared at the pile of rubble as he indifferently uttered these 4 words. Without any hesitation, his figure soared into the sky and directly landed on the back of the icy demonic eagle that was hovering in midair. He then said to Xie Fei, "We can leave now." Gee! The ice demon eagle flapped its wings and screeched. It seemed to be cheering for Du Xiaofu, and then flew away. Looking at Du Xiaofu's departing figure, the people of the Du family all had extremely ugly expressions. In the end, Du Xiaofu left behind the 4 words "can't even withstand a single blow." That was his disdain and contempt for the entire Du household. The peak existence of the younger generation of the Du family, Du Yi, was actually so weak that he couldn't even withstand a single blow. The face of the Du family this time was even more lost than yesterday when all the experts were swept away. Ka ka! Within the pile of rubble, Duyi's body struggled to climb out. The surrounding Du Qi and several other Du family youths immediately went forward to support Duyi. But at this moment, Duyi's elegant white robe and black hair were already in a sorry state. His face was pale, and the corners of his mouth were dripping with blood. From his dispirited aura, it was unknown how many bones in his body had been shattered by Du Xiaofu. With just one move, he had lost the ability to fight again. Heaven's sins can be avoided, but self-inflicted sins cannot be avoided. The general crossed his arms. On his angular face, there was a faint smile in his eyes. After glancing at Duyi, who was being supported, his imposing figure turned around and left. One big chapter, 2 days in a row, so today's update is a little late. Little you, try to update earlier tomorrow. Once again, thank you brothers and sisters for your support. Finally, weekly begging for flowers. Of course, I also appeal to readers who have the means to read the original version. Chapter 438. Duyi, who was supported to stand beside Du Qi and the others, looked at the back of the distant ice statue that was gradually shrinking. His eyes were filled with shock, and they gradually became dispirited and resentful. Ouyang Shuang looked at the ice demon condor in the distance. She wasn't too surprised, it seemed like everything was within her expectations. Her big eyes looked at Dark Wolf, who wasn't too far away. Her eyes turned cold and she said to Dark Wolf, "You go back first, he will look for you. Remember what you said, if not, my Ouyang Palace will be the first to hunt you down." "Yes, I, Dark Wolf, will definitely remember this." Dark Wolf trembled and immediately bowed. Putting aside the fact that Du Xiaofu was surrounded by so many people from the Ouyang Palace, even the person in front of him was the young miss of the Ouyang Palace. If he dared to do anything, he would not be able to survive in the entire empire. What shocked Dark Wolf even more was the scene just now. Duyi of the Du family, the genius who had once shocked the imperial capital and the entire empire, was at the peak of the martial lord realm. However, he was seriously injured by Du Xiaofu in 2 moves and could no longer fight. If he dared to have any thoughts of betrayal, the consequences were obvious. He would probably never show his face again in this lifetime. Ouyang Shuang looked at Dark Wolf, then walked forward. After a few steps, she gently came to Qiangyu's side and said in a low voice, "He asked me to tell you something. Your spirit gate is broken, but it doesn't mean that you can't continue to cultivate. If you still want to be interested in the path of martial arts, go and find him. He might have a way to let you walk the path of martial arts again." After Ouyang Shuang finished speaking, she went to Ouyang Qiu's side. She signaled with her eyes, and Ouyang Qiu and the people from the Ouyang Palace left on their demon beast mounts. Qiangyu's body trembled, and then he stood on the spot. His dispirited and lifeless eyes began to ripple, and the ripples became more and more intense. The bamboo forest was lush and green. From afar, it looked like a green barrier. A cool breeze swept past, and the green bamboos on the mountains swayed gently in the wind. The bamboo forest swayed gently, emitting a pleasant sound. It was as if someone was playing a huge bamboo flute, emitting a rhythmic sound, like a beautiful melody drifting out. "Xiaoqing, you guys play here. I'll bring your brother to meet someone, okay?" Outside the bamboo forest, Xie Fei asked Du Xiaoqing with a smile. "Du Xiaoyao, little tiger, look after little Qing. I'll be right back. Don't go too far," Du Xiaofu said to Du Xiaoyao and little tiger on his shoulder and behind him. In fact, other than little tiger, he was worried about Du Xiaoyao and Du Xiaoqing, who were a troublemaker. "Okay, we'll go play." Du Xiaoqing heard this and immediately went into the bamboo forest with Du Xiaoyao and little tiger. In the depths of the bamboo forest, the bamboos were all of the same thickness and length. They were slender, tall, and beautiful. After a while, Du Xiaofu, accompanied by Xie Fei, saw a skinny old man lying on a bamboo chair, taking a nap. The old man's tanned face looked as if it had been through wind, frost, rain, and snow for a long time. As if he had sensed someone approaching, the slightly closed eyes on his wrinkled face opened. His gaze immediately landed on Du Xiaofu. His eyes moved and he immediately revealed a smile as he said, "There should be quite a few people looking for you now. I thought that if Fei were to look for you, she might not be able to invite you." Du Xiaofu heard this and immediately bowed. The skinny old man in front of him was none other than the North Vanquishing King. He chuckled on his resolute face and said, "Since you're looking for me, how would I dare not come? Grandfather, a little princess from the palace went to look for him too. But he said he wanted to visit grandfather first before going to the palace." CFA walked over slowly from the side. She was beautiful and charming, and she reached out to help the North Vanquishing King up from the bamboo chair. Hearing this, the North Vanquishing King was slightly stunned. On his skinny and dark face, his eyes were quite bright without any turbidity. He looked at Du Xiaofu for a few seconds and then said with a smile, "Good boy, this old man didn't misjudge you. This guy just fought with Dui from the Du family in the Qian family. Dui has also reached the peak of the Martial Lord realm, the Nirvana realm." CFA told the North Vanquishing King about what happened just now in a light tone. "You fought with the Du family? The peak of the Martial Lord realm, the Nirvana realm? That guy is really scary. I really don't know what kind of good deeds the Du family has accumulated to have so many young people." Hearing this, the North Vanquishing King sighed. He then looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "You didn't lose when you fought with Dui, right?" This, Du Xiaofu didn't know what to say, so he smiled faintly. CFA opened her red lips slightly and said to the North Vanquishing King, "Dui lost in 2 moves, and he lost very badly." Hearing this, the North Vanquishing King's bright eyes were also stunned. From the words "lost very badly," it wasn't hard to imagine some things. Dui, who was at the peak of the Martial Lord realm, the Nirvana realm, was defeated in 2 moves. With the North Vanquishing King's eyesight and experience, he naturally knew what this meant. The new generation excels the old, and there are talents in every generation. The North Vanquishing King looked at Du Xiaofu. He was skinny, and the plain long robe he wore made him look like a bamboo pole carrying a cloth bag. After a long while, he came back to his senses. With shock in his eyes, he said, "I only knew about some things between you and the Du family yesterday. So you have that kind of relationship with the Du family, and you are even Du Tingshuan's son. Like father, like son. Old Mr. knows my father?" Hearing this, Du Xiaofu frowned and said, "Old Mister, can you tell me about the things between my father and the Du family? You still don't know about the things between your father and the Du family?" The North Vanquishing King was a little surprised. From the news he got yesterday, he thought this fierce little guy already knew about the things that happened back then. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone to wipe out the Du family. "I don't know much." Du Xiaofu also didn't know much about the drunkard's father and the Du family. He only knew from his elder sister that the drunkard's father was very close to the Du family, and that the Du family and the Du family were of the same origin. "I also don't know much about the things that happened back then. After all, it's a matter of the Du family. If you have the chance, you can ask your father, and he will know." Looking at Du Xiaofu, the North Vanquishing King spoke after a while. There was an obscure look in his eyes, as if there was something that he couldn't say. "Old Mister, how have you been recently?" Du Xiaofu didn't ask any more about the drunkard's father and the Du family. After all, it was a matter of the Du family, and the North Vanquishing King probably didn't know much about it. "I'm still the same, but I'm afraid I won't be able to live much longer." The North Vanquishing King stretched his thin body. His originally thin body now looked more like a long mulberry stick. "Heaven helps the worthy, I'll be fine." Du Xiaofu knew that the North Vanquishing King was injured, and even the King of Medicine couldn't do anything about it. He didn't know if the King of Medicine really couldn't do anything or if he was just pretending. Du Xiaofu made a mental note that when he went back, he must ask the King of Medicine again. This thin old man in front of him had helped him before, and he must repay his kindness. Maybe this is fate, and it's not up to people at all. It's good that you've thought it through. After living for so long, you're already stronger than many people. You should be content." The North Vanquishing King smiled, looked at Du Xiaofu, and said, At that time, the king of medicine said that I would die in at least half a year, or at most 3 years. Now half a year has passed, but there are still 2 things in my heart that I can't let go of. Cough, cough. Before he finished speaking, the North vanquishing king suddenly coughed. His body that was like a mulberry stick coughed so hard that his chest violently heaved up and down, as if his body was about to break at any time. Grandpa, slow down a bit. CFA's beautiful face was full of worry. She gently patted the North vanquishing king's back, hoping that it could ease his coughing. Sir, you will be fine. After I go back, I will definitely help you think of a way, Du Xiaofu softly said. At this moment, he didn't know how he could help. He really wasn't good at medicine, and he didn't have much research and understanding. It's enough that you have the heart. The North vanquishing king stopped coughing and looked at Du Xiaofu. His thin and dark face became a bit more serious. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said, Little guy, I called you here today because I really do have something to ask of you. Du Xiaofu nodded, looked at the North vanquishing king, and said, Sir, please go ahead. I don't think I will live for much longer. If one day, the Xia clan encounters an unsolvable problem after I die, please take care of them for the sake of our friendship. The North vanquishing king said. Sir, what do I have to do to take care of the Xia clan? Du Xiaofu bitterly smiled. The Xia clan, even if the North vanquishing king wasn't around one day, would still be the Xia clan. However, he was nothing now. Even his cultivation strength was only at the nirvana realm of pulse spirit. If I say you have it, then you have it. Don't tell me you are going to reject an old man like me. The North vanquishing king glanced at Du Xiaofu and said. It seemed like he had to agree even if he didn't want to. All right. If I have the ability in the future, of course, I will remember what you said. Du Xiaofu nodded. He was indebted to the North vanquishing king. If he had the ability in the future, how could he reject such a request? Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, a smile appeared on the North vanquishing king's face. He looked at CFA beside him, and then said to Du Xiaofu, This old man has a second thing that I can't let go of. My granddaughter has always been arrogant. She has never looked down on the young talents in the capital. If this girl is still not married in a few years, how about you marry her? This old man will be completely relieved. Grandpa, what are you talking about? CFA's beautiful eyes immediately stared at the North vanquishing king. She didn't expect her grandpa to say something like this in front of that guy. She instantly became shy, which made her look even more beautiful and charming. Her face was blushing. Chapter 439. Du Xiaofu was also taken aback. Looking at the charming and alluring woman beside him, he said to North vanquishing prince, Old mister, please don't joke around. I really can help you with this. What do you mean? Are you looking down on me? Hearing Du Xiaofu's rejection, CFA's flushed face instantly glared at Du Xiaofu. Her red lips pouted slightly. This brat was young, but he still looked down on her. Was she really inferior to those little girls? Miss Xie, that's not what I meant. You're noble, beautiful, and have an extraordinary aura. How would I dare look down on you? I'm the one who's not good enough. Du Xiaofu clicked his tongue. He didn't know how he had offended CFA again. However, her coquettish look was actually quite beautiful. If he could marry her, his drunkard father, first uncle, and second uncle would probably be very happy too. Du Xiaofu, what are you thinking about? How can you think about these things before the whole family reunites? Du Xiaofu scolded himself silently, and put away his messy thoughts. That's more like it. However, it's not that you're not good enough. It's just that I won't be with you guys anymore. You guys take your time chatting. CFA finally softened her tone towards Du Xiaofu. However, she seemed to have thought of something. Her beautiful face froze, and her face flushed red again. Her beautiful figure flashed away. Haha, this girl. North vanquishing prince was all smiles. He seemed to be very happy today. However, he started coughing again. Old mister, take it easy. Du Xiaofu immediately supported North Vanquishing Prince. Mimicking CFA, he gently patted North Vanquishing Prince's back, hoping to ease his coughing. Don't call me old mister. Your father Du Tingxian and this old man have met a few times before. He also called me Uncle Xie. You can call me Grandpa from now on. You won't lose out. North Vanquishing Prince looked at Du Xiaofu, his dark and wrinkled face full of kindness. Thank you, grandfather, Du Xiaofu said softly. Since his drunkard father had called him uncle, it was indeed not a loss for him to call him grandfather. Good, good, good. Then he looked at Du Xiaofu and said seriously, Good boy, you actually called me grandpa. Then remember, from now on, you are half a member of the Xia family, half a grandson of this old man. In the imperial capital, you just don't bully others. But if someone bullies you, you don't have to be afraid. You have the whole Xia family behind you, so you don't have to give face to anyone. Looking at the skinny old man beside him, Du Xiaofu felt warmth in his heart. He nodded slightly and didn't say anything. Du Xiaofu helped North Vanquishing Prince to sit on the rattan chair. Then he chatted with North Vanquishing Prince about everything under the sun, just like a real grandfather and grandson. Occasionally, there would be laughter from the two of them. A kind grandfather and a filial grandson, it was really enviable. Du Xiaofu finally understood what it meant to have an old man at home was like having a treasure. North Vanquishing Prince knew a lot about astronomy, geography, and interesting stories. As they chatted, Du Xiaofu gained a lot of knowledge. Unknowingly, the old man and the young man chatted until the evening. When the sky was about to turn dark, Du Xiaofu said his goodbyes and left. The sun was setting, and the silvery gray dew shrouded the bamboo forest. A gentle breeze gently blew the green bamboos, making continuous sounds. North Vanquishing Prince was gently lying on the rattan chair. CFA gently walked over. Her aura was like an orchid, revealing her charm. Then she quietly stood in front of the rattan chair. Little girl Feier, have you sent that little guy away? North Vanquishing Prince slowly straightened his body. On his skinny and tanned face, his eyes were bright without any turbidity. He should have gone to the palace. CFA's beautiful eyes slightly looked around. A gentle breeze blew through the bamboo forest, and a few strands of hair casually fluttered around her waist. Her eyes hesitated for a while, before she asked North Vanquishing Prince, Grandfather, why didn't you tell him about the matter between his father and the Du household? I feel sorry for that little guy. The Du household had already gone overboard 17 years ago, and this time they are still going overboard. I really don't know what that old man of the Du family is thinking. Does he think that he can pretend that nothing happened just because he is in seclusion? North Vanquishing Prince's bright eyes suddenly surged with a fierce glint, as if a dormant beast had suddenly awakened. He said, Since that little guy called me grandfather, then he is my grandson. That old man of the Du family turned a blind eye, but I am still alive. If the Du household goes overboard again, I will not agree. Grandfather, take care of your body, CFA said softly. Her bright eyes were fluctuating. She had not seen her grandfather so agitated for a long time. Phew! North Vanquishing Prince's breath eased a little. He turned around to look at CFA and said, Little girl Feier, keep an eye on the things outside. As long as he is in the capital, you can't let him be bullied. And the palace, there are some things that he is not clear about. Don't let him be used by others. If necessary, remind him. I understand. CFA nodded, looked at North Vanquishing Prince, and said, Grandfather, then he will be my little brother from now on? Sigh, if that little guy is my grandson-in-law, it would be great. North Vanquishing Prince sighed, and said softly, I don't care about you young people's matters. Little girl, if you don't do it now, then in the future that little guy will be taken away by those fat little girls. It will be too late for you to regret. That little guy's strength is not bad. On the street, Jin Qingchun's voice came into Du Xiaofu's ears. Little guy. Du Xiaofu was surprised, and immediately asked Jin Qingchun who was in the small pagoda. Brother Qingchun, how old are you? Anyway, that little guy is just a little guy in front of me. Jin Qingchun's voice sounded very proud, and then he said to Du Xiaofu, "Pay attention these days, and help me find some elixirs and pills that can help the primordial spirit." "Okay, no problem," Du Xiaofu said. At dusk, the palace under the curtain of the night was shockingly huge. The red palace walls were so tall that it looked like a giant dragon entrenched in the dragon city. Du Xiaofu, Du Xiaoqing, Du Xiaoyao, and the little tiger arrived in front of the palace. The huge palace gate was spacious, and it was heavily guarded. There was no place to hide, and the palace guards came up to question them from afar. When Du Xiaofu took out the dragon pattern token given to him by the second princess Qingyan and said that he was looking for the second princess, the eyes of the guards trembled, and the look in their eyes changed. The head guard personally led the way, and very respectfully led Du Xiaofu, Du Xiaoqing, and the others into the palace. Walking into the palace, Du Xiaofu sighed. The inside of the palace walls was even more magnificent than the inside of Prince Xie's mansion. There was a building every 5 steps, and a pavilion every 10 steps. The corridors were winding, and the eaves were high. It was unknown how far it stretched. The yellow and red glazed eaves outlined a huge winding silhouette in the vast palace. It was magnificent and magnificent. What a powerful aura! What caused Du Xiaofu to be the most amazed was that he could feel a majestic aura crushing down on him the moment he stepped into the palace. It was as if a huge dragon was present in the palace. Could this be the legendary Imperial Dragon aura? Du Xiaofu thought to himself. Just in the afternoon, he heard some interesting stories from the North Vanquishing Prince, and one of them was the Imperial Dragon aura. It was said that the Imperial Dragon aura could only be found in the palace, and it was very powerful. The aura inside is not weak. Du Xiaoqing also noticed the aura inside the palace. Although she was a little surprised, she did not pay too much attention to it. Following the head guard, Du Xiaofu did not know how many palaces they had passed. After that, the head guard handed him over to a palace maid who looked to be in her 30s, and they continued to walk into the palace. Along the way, Du Xiaofu only looked around at the golden glazed tiles and the multi-eaves palace roofs. Under the setting sun, it was a splendid scene. When the last ray of light disappeared, Du Xiaofu finally arrived at the entrance of a palace. There was a sentry every 3 steps, and there was a sentry every 5 steps. Along the way, there were many palace guards patrolling. The palace was tall and majestic, with an antique style. It had vermilion pillars, and on a huge and gorgeous horizontal board, there were 3 words. Guangmoon Palace. Sir, this is the Guangmoon Palace, where the first princess and the second princess live. The first princess has ordered that we are not allowed to enter the Guangmoon Palace at will. Therefore, sir, please go in and find the second princess. After the palace maid finished speaking to Du Xiaofu, she still seemed to be a little worried. She specifically told Du Xiaofu, "The backyard of the palace is mostly for the women. If you do not have the golden dragon token and are not an ordinary VIP, you will not be able to come here. Sir, please do not wander around. If you are encountered by the patrolling guards, it will cause trouble." "I know. Thank you for leading the way." Du Xiaofu nodded in response. "Sir, you are too polite." The palace maid was a little surprised. She then looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "I heard that the second princess went out to play with other princes in the afternoon. I am afraid that she has not returned yet. Sir, since you have the golden dragon token, you should have a good relationship with the second princess. You can go in and wait. However, with the playful nature of the second princess, I am afraid that you will have to wait a little longer. I still have things to do, so I will take my leave now." With that, the palace maid retreated respectfully and turned to leave. Du Xiaofu raised his head and looked at the Guangmoon Palace in front of him. There were 3 floors, and the cornices were ancient red and yellow. The upper floor was light green, and the color scheme was elegant. At this time, the sun was setting in the west, and the curtain of night was beginning to fall. The night fog lingered around the palace, and the pavilion was in the haze, appearing and disappearing from time to time. It was extremely beautiful. Xiao Yu continued to write. Ask for flowers, recommend coffee. Chapter 440. What a big and beautiful place! I'll go in and take a look. Du Shaoqing gazed at Guan Yu Palace. Instantly, her figure skipped into the palace like a butterfly. Du Xiaoyao and Little Tiger also followed closely behind Du Shaoqing, entering the Guan Yu Palace together. Don't run around! Du Xiaofu had no choice but to chase after them. After all, this was the Imperial Palace. He could not allow Du Shaoqing and Du Xiaoyao to cause any trouble. However, by the time Du Xiaofu entered the Guan Yu Palace, Du Shaoqing and Du Xiaoyao had already run off to who knows where. Du Xiaofu could only follow their auras. There was no one else in the vast Guan Yu Palace. Du Xiaofu chased after Du Shaoqing and Du Xiaoyao's auras. His attention was immediately drawn by the resplendent decorations all around him, and he began to look around. Inside the Guan Yu Palace, the corridors were winding, with artificial mountains and ponds everywhere. Du Xiaofu walked slowly. Under the cover of the night, the palace was dark and serene, and he did not know where he had walked to. There seems to be someone here. That girl has run over here? Suddenly, with his keen spiritual force, Du Xiaofu sensed that there were people not too far ahead. He did not think too much about it. It was most likely Du Shaoqing, Du Xiaoyao, Little Tiger, and the others. There seemed to be no one else in this vast Guan Yu Palace at this moment. Within the palace, artificial mountains were everywhere. Between the corridors and the corridors was a hot spring. The spring water gushed out, dense mist rising from it, and hot steam rising from it. Night had just fallen, and the sky was hazy. The moon had just risen from the east. There was a stretch of clothes by the side of the pool, and the ripples on the surface of the pool were light. Du Xiaofu appeared at the edge of the hot spring. A rockery stood tall like a barrier. Du Xiaofu thought that Du Shaoqing and Du Xiaoyao were here. Looking through the rockery, he saw a woman bathing in the unobstructed hot spring. Her skin was as white as snow, and her long black hair was scattered on the spring water. She was elegant and seductive. She was also humming a melody that Du Xiaofu could not hear clearly. Under the first moon, the water in the pool was enshrouded in mist. Du Xiaofu could only see the woman's delicate face. She had a jade nose and cherry lips. The water in the pool reached her chest, half of her soft breasts were exposed. Her slim shoulders and undulating chest formed an alluring region, adding to her charm and seduction. It's not Shaoqing. Looking at the sudden scene in front of him, Du Xiaofu was stunned. Then, for some reason, his breathing became heavy, and his entire body seemed to stiffen. He stared blankly at the scene in the pool. He knew that it was not Du Shaoqing and Du Xiaoyao, but he could not bear to look away. Splash! Just as Du Xiaofu was in a daze, and his blood was rushing to his head, he heard the ripples of the pool water. The woman had actually come out of the bath in front of him. A perfect and exquisite body slowly walked out of the pool water. The lithe figure was completely naked. Her breasts were soft and round, her waist was slender, and her buttocks were firm and round. Her slender legs were tall, outlining an incomparably seductive arc. Her skin was like cream, and below her lower abdomen was even more eye-catching. Du Xiaofu swore that this was the first time he had seen such a scene since he was a child. Du Xiaofu swore that in his 17 years of life, this was the first time he realized that he was actually not a gentleman. Because at this moment, when he saw this hot and charming scene, he did not leave. Instead, he opened his eyes wide and looked up and down. He even swallowed a mouthful of saliva in his throat. Who is it? Suddenly, just as Du Xiaofu could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, the woman who slowly walked out of the hot spring suddenly shouted. In a short moment, a palm print suddenly slammed on the rockery. Rumble! The rockery suddenly collapsed. The gravel collapsed and fell into the pool water. Quickly, waves of water shot up to the sky. Oh no, I've been discovered! Du Xiaofu came back to his senses. He felt a little guilty. She gushed out from the soles of his feet, and he immediately retreated. He did not dare to stay any longer. Chi! However, the woman's speed was as fast as lightning. She was even faster than Du Xiaofu had imagined. Her body suddenly appeared in front of Du Xiaofu as he turned around and was about to leave. Without any hesitation, she directly slapped out with her palm. "Miss, this is a misunderstanding," Du Xiaofu shouted. Due to his guilty conscience, he did not dare to use too much strength. His palm came over and lightly slapped out with lightning speed. "It's you!" And in this split second, the woman seemed to have recognized Du Xiaofu. She was so shocked that her entire body trembled. Her delicate face changed greatly, and the palm print that she had slapped out also stopped in front of Du Xiaofu's chest. However, in his hurry, Du Xiaofu did not look carefully. Only when he felt the woman's scream did he realize that the woman had stopped. However, he was unable to stop himself. Although he hurriedly retracted his profound chi, his right hand still landed on the woman's chest. Immediately, Du Xiaofu felt that where his palm touched, the soft area was smooth and soft. The woman did not realize that she was still naked at this moment, and even more so, did not expect such a thing to happen. She only felt a sudden numbness on her chest, as if she had been electrocuted. "You hooligan, little bastard!" With a delicate shout, the woman's slender palm print stopped. A wave of profound chi immediately surged out and landed directly on Du Xiaofu's chest. Walala! Du Xiaofu's body flew backwards. He was originally at the edge of the pool, and in his panic, he was immediately thrown into the hot spring pool, causing a large wave of water. Plop! Just as Du Xiaofu was caught off guard, he choked on a mouthful of water. Just as his body emerged, he saw the figure in front of him descend like lightning. A snow-white arm directly pressed down on his shoulder, and she hurriedly said, "I'm warning you, quickly close your eyes and hide in the pool. You're not allowed to peek, or else I won't let you off." Before Du Xiaofu could regain his senses, he was forcefully pressed into the hot spring by the woman, and in his panic, he choked on another mouthful of water. "Big sister, I'm back. Was there anyone here just now?" Just as Du Xiaofu was being forcefully pressed into the hot spring by the woman, a girl with short braids walked over and looked at the wet surroundings suspiciously. "No, I've been bathing alone." "Why are you back?" The woman didn't know why, but she also felt a little guilty. Thinking about the scene just now, her delicate face immediately flushed red. Fortunately, it was night, and the hot spring water was able to relax the meridians and strengthen the circulation of qi and blood, so it was difficult for people to notice anything strange. The girl looked to be about 16 or 17 years old. Under her slender eyelashes, her big eyes were sparkling like black gems. She looked at the woman in the pool and said, "Is that so? Coincidentally, I also want to bathe. After playing with them for the whole day, my whole body is about to stink." As soon as her voice fell, the girl leaped, and the layers of her clothes immediately fell off. Then, a bright and clean body like white jade directly jumped into the pool, causing a large wave of water. "Second sister!" the woman shouted, but before her voice fell, the girl with short braids had already fallen into the pool. The pool water was clear, and under the moonlight the scales rippled. Du Xiaofu didn't close his eyes as he was told. In the clear pool water, he could vaguely see two seductive bodies in front of him. One was alluring, and the other was carrying Akiji. Faintly, Du Xiaofu heard a familiar voice saying, "Big sister, why do you always put your hand in the water? Help me take a look. Was your chest the same size as mine back then? Why do I feel that mine won't be as big as yours in the future? Sigh, when can I be like you?" In the pool water, Du Xiaofu felt the delicate hand pressing on his shoulder become more and more forceful, as if it was going to crush his shoulder. Pain came from his shoulder. Du Xiaofu struggled a few times, but the strength of the slender hand did not lessen. Instead, it increased in strength. This woman, she must be doing it on purpose. Du Xiaofu thought to himself. He couldn't be bullied for nothing, so he didn't hold back and pinched into the pool. He didn't know where he pinched, but it was firm and smooth to the touch. "Ah!" In the hot spring, the short-braided girl suddenly screamed. She felt a sharp pain coming from her buttocks. She immediately glared at the woman and stretched out her hand to touch her buttocks, saying, "Big sister, why did you pinch me?" I wanted to see if you've grown sturdy after all these years. The woman immediately understood the reason. Her beautiful face didn't change, but she secretly clenched her teeth and exerted more force on Du Xiaofu's shoulder. That shameless bastard, he had taken advantage of her in the mountain range of savage beasts. Now, he was actually reaching out his evil claws to her second sister. She definitely couldn't let him off. Even if you see if I've grown sturdy, you can't use so much force. The short-braided girl glared at the woman and then continued to bathe. In the pool, Du Xiaofu's shoulder was getting more and more painful, but he could only endure the pain. When he heard the scream, he realized that he had pinched the wrong person. He didn't dare to make a sound, but he didn't hold back. His hands started to pinch everywhere. He didn't care where it was, he just pinched first. Who asked this woman to use so much force? His shoulder was about to be crushed. Thump, thump, thump. Instantly, the pool water beside the woman surged as Du Xiaofu carelessly pinched countless places. Big sister, what are you doing? Looking at the surging pool water beside the woman, the short-braided girl asked doubtfully. It's nothing. You can go back now that you're done. I'll soak some more. The woman squeezed out a smile as she spoke to the short-braided girl. Take your time, I'll go back first. Strange, Senior Du clearly said that he would come to the palace later. Why hasn't he come to find me yet? She put on her long dress and left. In the end, she turned around and said to the woman with a bitter expression, Big sister, be gentler next time. My butt hurts because of you. Today is the third night watch. I personally feel that this chapter should be condensed. However, I also feel that although some ink seems unnecessary, it is related to some of the later plot foreshadowing, so it cannot be omitted. Tomorrow, on the 4th, Xiaoyu will continue to update on the 5th. It should be around 7 p.m. If the fresh flowers reach 2:49 p.m. tomorrow night, Xiaoyu will update 10 p.m. Please don't update 2:50, or I will cry. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.